Isabella's whole life was built on lies and trying to make things right. One day, her dad dropped the bomb that her mom wanted a divorce. He expected shock and sympathy, but his daughter just smiled. The guy asked her to go talk to the woman who'd lost her mind. To his surprise, Isabella just gave a lazy smile and said it wasn't exactly shocking. She locked eyes with him and told him he had a real gift for pushing people over the edge. He lost it when she added that she'd even helped him go belly up. The guy froze, a nasty look on his face, and whispered that she shouldn't mess with him like that. He tried to pull the "we're family" card. The girl thoughtfully touched her throat and said she'd have given back this tainted blood a long time ago if she could. He stood up and declared he was just trying to protect his family, like the head of the house should. Isabella smirked and reminded him about that time he was shacking up with her mom's friend. The guy protested, saying he did it for the good of their lineage. The girl cut him off, stood up, and ordered him to get out. The second she took a step, her father totally lost it and pinned her against the wall. He started choking her, demanding she remember who raised her and put food on the table all these years. Even then, she was smiling, saying he shouldn't have bothered bringing her into this world. She asked him how it felt to be taken down by the seed of trouble he planted himself. The man went white with shock and called her a spawn of the devil. The instant he screamed that insult, the mansion doors swung open. The guy walked in, like some freaky ghost, and just snapped his fingers without a word. Right after that, the raging dude's body just floated up in the air. It was like some unseen force was controlling him, sending him flying straight into the wall. Then his body just dropped, like a rock crumbling apart. He got back on his feet, trying to shake off the insane pain. He turned around and saw his daughter's fiancé grinning like he'd just won. The man went white as a sheet, trying to figure out what the heck just happened. The pretty boy snapped 2 fingers and asked if this was what he was talking about. Immediately, Isabella's dad shot up in the air, like he was on a string. The next second, he slammed back down, and the guy asked if he had anything to say. The guy stood up and declared that no nobleman should treat another like that. He just smirked back and reminded him that his earldom was already mortgaged to the hilt. He called his cat over and smiled, while Isabella's father considered what he'd said. The cat introduced herself as the new head of the Collins family, like she was a real person. The whole thing felt like some kind of dark magic, and the ex-aristocrat was shaking in his boots. He dropped to his knees and figured he must be under some kind of influence. Meanwhile, the guy gave Bella's abused neck a disapproving look. He left a gentle kiss on her neck and said she had bruises there. The guy glared at the man and stated coldly that he'd pay for this. No sooner had he said it than a strange noose appeared around her father's neck. The sorcerer claimed he was still learning to control his power and could accidentally kill someone. He watched this guy hanging by a thread and asked for a little understanding. The spell broke when Bella smiled and asked them to leave the victim to her. The next second, the doors of their family mansion swung open and let the men inside. Bella said sadly that her father wasn't feeling well and they should call for Benjamin. The moment the guy touched his shoulders, he started begging him to listen. He frantically tried to explain everything that had happened to him in the last few minutes. To his surprise, the guy just coldly concluded that he was sick. He jumped up, totally shocked, when Benjamin suggested it was madness. Isabella was crying dramatically, saying she didn't know what to do with him. Her dad tried to fight back and blame her when the guys went to tie him up. He was screaming at that backstabbing Benjamin before he got his mouth shut. Isabella kept up the act, looking all worried about her father. He watched her fake those tears, like she was totally innocent. Then she gave him this wicked smile right before they hauled him off to the booby hatch. Isabella Leonard showed no guilt, no sadness, just seemed like a beautiful devil. Her bloody revenge started the second she died at her father's hand. Nobody would have guessed that a chill summer day would bring her death in a dungeon. Her uncle was taunting her mom in her cell, straight up enjoying her downfall. She was trying to figure out why Aster was going so hard, since her dad had already disowned her. He asked her if she really didn't know the kind of fate that awaited a descendant of emperors. Aster hated her for being a princess, for preventing his father from acknowledging him as the heir. He tormented her over and over, like he was taking out all those years on her. His gaze cut through the air when he spotted the prison guard. Lily couldn't believe her eyes when they dragged another girl into the cell. The next thing she knew, her beautiful, blonde-haired daughter was sitting right in front of her. Lily Leonard was the emperor's precious daughter, who mistakenly fell in love with a monster. She got pregnant and then married him against her father's wishes. The woman believed that her husband felt the same way about her as she did about him. Lily realized what was coming and started begging her brother for mercy. The battered woman tearfully begged him to spare her child. Prince Aster wiped out his older brother because he wanted to be emperor. All his sister's pleas just gave him some kind of twisted pleasure. Isabella knew it was pointless to beg him for mercy. She froze when he pulled a bottle of weird goo out of his pocket. He approached his niece and said she snuck into the emperor's bedroom, hiding this. He smirked and asked if she was trying to poison him. The girl smirked back and declared that wasn't the case at all. She said she had no reason to do that, since it would actually benefit him. The girl stayed silent when he told her she was being way too sassy. She confessed it was an antidote, something that could revive someone who'd been poisoned. She was floored when he shoved the bottle at her and ordered her to prove it. He said she'd be spared if her mother survived drinking the potion. Right now, she was considered a criminal, caught trying to off the emperor. Isabella started to explain that a healthy person shouldn't drink it. Even so, her mother grabbed the bottle and told her not to hurt her daughter. Aster smirked and asked if she knew her father still hadn't named an heir. It was like he was waiting for a capable princess to end the war with the demons. The guy gave a victorious grin and commanded her to down the whole thing. Isabella couldn't believe the medicine she created would be the end of her own mother. She begged her to stop, but the woman was already ready to drink it down. The bloody liquid spilling from her mouth made it clear her time was up. In the end, it all turned out to be a carefully planned execution for them. The entire town demanded that the two witches be burned for their crimes. Aster stood on the platform, revealing the conspiracy between the former princess and Duke Blake. On top of that, her daughter Isabella attempted to off the emperor. Her mother risked her life for that peace treaty, but it was all twisted around. Bella lowered her gaze, confused, watching someone approach them. She was beyond shocked when she realized it was her own father. He declared that his beloved wife and daughter were corrupted by dark forces and became witches. He vowed to burn them for letting themselves become traitorous demons. The crowd roared, cheering on the burning of two innocent women. Bella called her father a good actor for pretending to love his family. The man smirked and called her mother a fool, 'cause he wanted power, not love. Isabella was trying to figure out what her mom saw in that jerk. She wondered if there was any way to undo what had happened. Bella whispered she'd sell her soul to a demon just to save her mother. As the flames took her flesh and blood, her spirit felt like it was transported somewhere else. She froze when someone said she had made 3 ridiculous wishes. Bella tried to ask who was talking to her and where she was. As soon as the voice identified itself as a demon, lights ignited in the area. A woman towered before her, reminding her that she had summoned her. Bella immediately dropped to her knees before the demoness and begged her to turn back time. The woman paused, remembering how she'd wanted to tear everyone to shreds. The girl grinned and replied that she'd like to do it herself. Her answer struck her as so amusing that she burst out laughing. She waved her hand and said that she already looked worse than a demon. She held out a hand with a flower, as if she wanted to give her something. A book appeared before Isabella, containing the story of her poor mother. Isabella froze in astonishment, unable to believe she could read it. She finally grabbed the book and hurried to read what was written inside. Lily Leonard was a tragic princess who gave up everything. Her best friend and husband, who meant the world to her, betrayed her behind her back. Ultimately, they decided to become pawns of Prince Aster. Lily's husband decided to prove his loyalty and cornered his wife and daughter. With his own 2 hands, he forced them onto the funeral pyre. As if hypnotized, Bella asked her how far back she could send her. The demoness smiled and said she'd send her back exactly 3 years. Bella grinned and said she'd gladly give up her soul for that. Instead of her soul, the woman offered her a deal with the demon lord's son. He'd locked himself away in that magic tower for ages, and she was the one who had to drag him out. Caden Blake was supposed to be a symbol of peace, but he was just a regular half-breed. Decades ago, they arranged a political marriage to keep the peace. It was between Ethan Blake, the Empire's hero, and Hela Lucifer, a demon princess. They soon had a kid named Caden. He was the master of the Northern Magic Tower, but even then, nobody gave him any respect. Caden was useless to both the human and demon worlds because he was a half-breed. He tried to earn respect by going to the border and wiping out demons. Still, they treated him like a rabid dog because he was a demon's son killing his own kind. His demon blood lay dormant until he came of age, and then it triggered a massive mana surge. There was only one way to stabilize her. He had to make a pact with a human and become a full-fledged demon. He refused to become a demon and kept suffering from mana surges. That's how Caden's body managed to last 8 years, before finally dying in an explosion. His life story was known as the Mad Dog of the North. Hela said he had to become a demon to avoid death. Isabella decided to ask why she was chosen for this. The woman laughed and said her appearance made people want to tear her apart. Bella seemed arrogant but smart, and she radiated power. All of that made her strong enough to stand up to a demon. Hela wanted him to crush all the weaklings and become the next demon king. All he had to do was make a contract with her, and she'd yank him out of there. Bella thought it was pointless, but she decided to take the chance anyway. The demoness was stoked that she agreed to her terms. Out of the blue, she asked if she could borrow him for her little scheme. Her confidence and drive cracked the demoness up. The woman touched her shoulders and said she had to bring him back within a year. As soon as she promised to see the plan through, a ring popped onto her finger. She told her to use it if some rabid mutt started barking up her tree. The demoness grinned and said she was giving her the dress as a gift. Bella freaked out and asked how to use it. Hela decided to ignore her question and just told her not to die. All Isabella could do was fall, staring at her wicked grin. The next thing she knew, she was smack dab in the tower where Caden was. Bella grabbed her head and complained about being tossed around like that. The trip messed her up so bad, she didn't even notice the guy at first. She looked at him and felt her breath catch in her throat. He held out his sword and asked who she was. The guy calmly asked if she really showed up here without even knowing who he is. Bella smirked and said all she knows is that he's a monster, a killer, and a rabid dog. She mentioned she'd heard he doesn't off people unless he senses their mana. She stood up all proud and introduced herself, saying she was glad to meet us. Bella smiled and explained she's using her mom's and the Empire's princess's last name. He smirked and sheathed his sword when she called her father a real piece of work. The girl tried to calm her nerves and checked to see if he was buying it. He walked up to her and said out loud that she's neither a demon nor a monster. Caden figured his father sent her when he saw the mana stone on her finger. He guessed her father sold her out, and the Collins house fell while he was focused on other stuff. She was shocked when he started stripping and suggested they get down to business. Caden figured his father wants an heir ASAP. He looked into her eyes, connecting it to the fact they'd stuck a woman with him. Bella was mentally cursing, trying to figure out how to avoid him getting handsy. She'd heard he was a real wild one, but didn't think he'd be coming on so strong. The second he gripped her waist, she realized he was just testing her. She decided to play along, stroking his face and agreeing to his proposition. Bella said she'd, fulfill her marital duties if he made her his wife. He scoffed, saying he could get that from others, but she'd definitely piqued his interest. Caden refused, saying there wasn't a single thing he wanted from her. He went silent when she mentioned his mother's name, the Demon Queen. She asked if he'd been fighting demons on the border, because he hated them so much. He blew up at her when she suggested he was just trying to get someone's attention. Bella said, cold as ice, that he just wanted to see his mom, who hadn't shown up. At first, he waited like a good little boy, but she never came. He's gotten his hands dirty time and again, just so she'd appear to him. He wasn't expecting motherly love, he just wanted to catch a glimpse. Bella hit him right where it hurt, and he started to crumble. He was in agony, begging her to stop messing with him. Isabella calmly watched his pain, because she knew exactly what was going on. She waited for him to drop to his knees, and then offered to be her husband for a year. He looked up, dazed, when she promised to help him see his mother. He blacked out the next second, totally unable to answer. Wiping out those demons up north actually did some good. The locals were thanking him, finally able to harvest their crops in peace. Up there, nobody looked down on him for being a demon's son. It was only for a little while, but he could actually feel at peace in that place. Sadly, that damn demon blood was still a major issue. Black wings tore out of his back, and wicked horns sprouted from his head. Everything went up in flames when the blast hit him. He'd been having this cursed nightmare about his death for 5 freaking years. The girl somehow managed to drag him from the balcony to the bed. She called him a dumbass and told him not to think he could weasel out of the contract. Suddenly, a little kitty meowing at her feet distracted her. She thanked the cat for helping her find the guy's bedroom. Isabella picked up the kitty and heard the demon waking up. He started making sounds like he was in agony, like his body was getting pounded. Isabella watched him, remembering what happened on the balcony last time. Back then, she acted like she wasn't even herself. Fear was churning inside her, but she knew there was no turning back now. She wiped his face with a cloth, not knowing where this courage came from. The girl thoughtfully looked away, like she was picturing her future fate. She looked at the demon and was actually glad she was at least marrying a hottie. Bella felt the fever had broken a little, so she decided to button up her shirt. She froze when he asked what she had done to him. The girl jumped back immediately and blurted out, "He's awake!" She held out a drink made from periwinkle, which is supposed to have a calming effect. Bella noticed his confusion and said, "You're not gonna die, okay?" Caden still took the glass in his hand and examined the contents. Eventually, he just gave in and took a sip. He was surprised when he tasted the unusual flavor of the red plant. Bella said, "Right now, you're only alive thanks to your cat." No sooner did he thank the cat and pat the bed, than it jumped right up. He caught Bella giving him the eye and asked what she was staring at. He seemed amused that she was digging his appearance. She calmly pointed out that he was the one who stripped down. He changed the subject, asking exactly how she'd help him meet the queen. His question seemed to catch her off guard, since she didn't actually know. She recalled that the demon lord was the strongest in the demon world. Hela only got the crown because she became the strongest female demon. Bella moved closer and offered him a contract to become the strongest demon. She added that after that, he could become the demon king. He asked if she really thought he should become one of that selfish breed. He froze when she called avoiding reality and the truth selfish. She mentioned that the sheer volume of his mana is so huge, his body's been holding on for 5 years already. Bella explained that the north would turn into a wasteland if he blew. The demon went pale when he realized she was saying the same things he'd seen in his dreams. For the first time, he understood that he wouldn't be the only one who died. Bella offered him revenge on his mother for abandoning her son for the throne. She smiled and added that it would be better than just sitting around waiting to kick the bucket. Looks like her manipulation actually had the desired effect. He asked how she planned to use him and how far she was willing to go. Bella tossed her hair back and dropped the bombshell that her dad cheated on her mom. She relived the moment she and her best friend found out about the affair. It made her absolutely sick, knowing she had that scumbag's blood running through her veins. She added that she'd spent ages figuring out how to make him pay for what he did. That's exactly why she decided to make her mom the empress. Her biggest obstacle was the second prince, which is why she needed the Blake family's support. She asked him to become the strongest pillar of support for her and her mother. She wanted to drag him down to hell by playing on his ambition for power. The girl knew it would hurt him more to be abandoned by the Empire's golden boy than to be a powerless husband. Caden smirked and concluded that she was going to bleed him dry. She mentioned they could get divorced. After he became the Demon King, he went along with it when she implied he couldn't stand the sight of her. The demon touched her hair and suggested they kick off the contract today. He gently kissed a strand of her hair, like he was trying to reel her in. The guy snuggled up even closer, bringing up her words about marital duties. He leaned in towards her lips, like he was about to, fulfill his obligations. Bella stopped him, saying they needed to seal the deal on the contract first. His cat called him a moron, saying he couldn't believe it took him 5 whole years. He hoped the demon would make up for lost time with some serious dedication. I guess Caden just found out his cat can actually talk. The next second, he just meowed calmly and licked his paw. The cat introduced himself as Meowser, the most capable low-ranking demon in the demon world. Usually, low-ranking demons get to choose a higher-ranking demon to serve. Meowser said sadly that he'd been waiting a whole 5 years before Caden finally did something. He was finally able to reveal his identity and wondered what else he could do. After that, he shot upwards, like he was about to attack the demon. He grabbed onto his hand with all his might, like he wanted revenge. Bella coughed in surprise and figured this was just a normal occurrence. She picked up the cat and was happy that he was there with them. Meowser reacted to the praise and added that he had fed and raised Caden. His job was to do this until he was actually ready to handle his responsibilities. Caden tried to argue, but the lesser demon immediately shut him down. He scurried off to the side and offered to finalize the contract. The second his paws hit the floor, a magic circle lit up around him. He immediately called over 2 contractors to stand inside the circle. Then, he ordered them to hold out their hands and scratched them a few times. He told Bella to spread the blood evenly as an offering. As soon as the liquid spilled, he started chanting a spell in Latin. Bella froze, feeling the space fill with a blinding flash. With each new line, she felt herself losing consciousness. No sooner had they signed the contract than she found herself at the Collins family estate. The girl groggily opened her eyes, catching a familiar scent. She sat up, trying to get her bearings. Bella turned and saw her mother sitting next to the bed. She couldn't believe her eyes, seeing her alive. She cried out with joy and hugged the woman, unable to contain her emotions. The woman didn't understand why her daughter was bawling like a baby. Isabella agreed, saying she must have had a real nightmare. Lily hugged her and said she'd heard dreams are the opposite of reality. She smiled and added that she'd been running a high fever this whole time. Bella's eyes widened when she heard her dad was pushing to get rid of the cat. The next thing she knew, a black tail flashed right in front of her face. Lily noticed the animal and asked where she'd found him. Bella hesitated because she couldn't bring herself to tell the truth. Lily said she just pretended not to notice anything and brought him here. The woman smiled warmly and told her to remember she's always got her back. Bella remembered how her mother had given up everything for her daughter. She was the only one who tried to protect her, even while dying in terrible pain. Lily was the kind of mom who loved her daughter more than anything. Isabella smiled warmly and vowed to protect her, no matter what it took. The next day, she got a note from her mom, saying she'd decided to hit the prayer room. She also mentioned she'd whipped up her favorite dish. Bella remembered how her mom always made her stewed beef when she was a kid. The food she made was so damn good, you could never forget it. The next thing she knew, the maid opened the door and brought in breakfast. She was going to leave the tray on the table, but Bella asked her to bring breakfast to the bed. Without a word, the woman set the tray with the plate on the bed. Bella immediately realized this wasn't the dish her mom had made. The maid froze when she heard Bella's unhappy tone. Isabella relayed her mother's message about making stewed beef. The maid smirked and said that the Marchioness Richmond had prepared the stew. She added that fatty food ruins your figure, and then she left. She was absolutely livid when Isabella ordered her to redo it. She said she couldn't eat food that smelled so awful. Bella saw the maid's stunned face and told her to get a move on. The woman brought her trays with the same dish several times, but Bella didn't like the food. She tormented the maid, demanding she bring the tray back 10 times over. An hour had passed as she remade the Marchioness's dish again and again. Finally, the maid lost it when Bella condemned the smell yet again. She asked furiously what specific smell she was talking about. Bella snapped that she didn't have to explain why she was feeling sick. The maid shrieked that she'd added tons of spices to mask the smell. The Marchioness suddenly appeared in the doorway, asking if her stew really stank. Isabella was smugly thrilled that she'd finally shown up. The Marchioness said that Tilda's daughter couldn't keep anything down. She's not feeling well. She asked if she was sure it wasn't, a certain condition. Katrina Richmond was the one who hooked up her dad with the second prince. She was the queen bee of high society, a real socialite. Bella smiled and asked how her husband was doing, the one she'd ditched early this morning. Katrina thought to herself that it was none of her business, but answered anyway. Bella kept asking questions, wondering if her inner circle knew she was stepping out on them. Even though they were being all chummy, you could cut the tension with a knife. When Katrin heard Lily had gone to the temple, she claimed she was just back from praying herself. Bella clocked her fancy getup and asked if she actually went to the temple dressed like that. Katrin said all that mattered was her sincerity and her donations. Bella smirked and said she probably didn't even need to go to confession. The woman laughed like it was a joke, but she totally caught Bella's shade. She remembered being grossed out by the smell and mentioned that Tilda's daughter ended up knocked up. The maid agreed, saying her daughter had been feeling pretty queasy in the mornings lately too. Katrin smiled and said she shouldn't have followed in her mother's footsteps in that kind of situation. Bella realized she was hinting at Lily's early pregnancy. She figured she was doing way better than the Marquise, who was raising someone else's kid. The Marquise married Katrina for the third time when he was 50. Katrina had a boy and got power, but there were rumors about the Marquise being infertile. Society was buzzing about how the young wife managed to give him a child. Bella felt sorry for the bedridden guy who didn't suspect a thing. Katrina told her to cut the crap and start eating breakfast. Bella deliberately dropped the tray and said she was super sorry. She was loving how much hatred twisted Katrina's face. Bella smirked and pointed out that Katrina's robes, her perfume, and the stew were awfully similar to Lily's. She repeated Katrin's question, asking if she was doing this on purpose. The woman bit her lip, furious, and demanded, "How dare you say that to me?" They turned as the man asked, "What in the world is going on here?" Bella's father always made an effort to look neat and professional, but now he showed up practically in his underwear. She clenched her fists, seething that they weren't even trying to hide it. Katrin burst into tears, saying Bella deliberately dumped the stew she made for her. For the first time, Bella regretted locking herself in her room all the time, just reading books. She cried, thinking about how she lost her mother because of all this. The girl stroked her scalded hand and said, "The plate was just too hot." Katrin froze, stunned as she realized she'd been burned. The maid jumped in, claiming she'd spilled the stew on purpose. She went still when he snapped at her, like she had no right to speak. Isabella's father demanded she be reminded of what this place was. He asked if she remembered what he specifically told her to do. She said that she was in charge of running the household. The man chucked a spoon at her and told her to make sure this kind of thing didn't happen again. The woman tearfully begged for forgiveness, clearly in a lot of pain. He was so furious because his young, beautiful daughter was a valuable asset. Bella secretly rejoiced that she'd dumped that gunk on her hand. This burn was nothing compared to the pain of being burned at the stake. Katrin saw the guy wasn't taking her side and quickly bailed. The man followed her out, saying he'd call a doctor. Isabella let out a tired breath when she heard the door click shut. She walked past the maid and said she had something to show her. The woman froze in shock when the girl took off her robe. She showed her her bare body and asked if she understood why her father was so worried. Bella added that she didn't care about her body, but for her father, it was a valuable asset. She said the only thing worse than a mark on her body was a nasty rumor about a secret pregnancy. Bella still remembered Tilda standing near the scaffold where the pyre was. She was laughing, spreading rumors that Isabella had given in to demonic temptation. The girl wanted to wipe that nasty smirk right off her face. She scared her, saying her father would nail her head to the gates if he heard the rumor. After that, she shoved the woman, sending her sprawling on the floor. She realized the lady knew about the rumor and started begging for forgiveness. Bella smiled and told her to watch her mouth from now on. She saw her heading to see the Marchioness off and ordered a bath prepared. Bella smiled, adding that the water should be warm and pink. The maid hastily gathered the tray and plate, promising to pass on the information. Before she left, Bella told her to knock first if she ever needed her hands again. She dropped a final hint that her actions would affect her own grandson. Chilling in the tub, the girl replayed how she needs to wield her power to the max. She winced when the maid dabbed at her wound with a cloth. Bella calmly explained it needed to be rinsed under cool, running water. She offered her a cherry, saying her skin was like white jade. The girl didn't expect that cherry to taste so damn good. The maids kept fawning over her with smiles, showering her with compliments. Isabella turned and flashed them a smile when they complimented her hair. The group of girls was immediately struck by her gentle smile. They said it was an honor to take care of her appearance. Bella headed straight to her father's study after her bath. He was really worried about whether that nasty wound of hers had healed up okay. Bella froze when he told her he hadn't changed his mind about the academy. She used to want to be a doctor, which is why she defied his orders and enrolled in the academy. She already knew all the consequences and gave up on that path. The old man was surprised when she asked him to prepare her debut. He couldn't believe she'd changed her mind after everything she'd been through. The girl touched his hand and said she'd learned a lot because of her injury. She quietly said that she finally realized how much she valued him. Isabella smiled and said she wanted to be useful to the Collins family. A sly but satisfied smirk crept across his face when he heard that. He was stoked and declared he'd find her a suitable match. The girl smiled and demanded he let her pick her own husband. She asked him if he knew why Viscount Lightman and Baron Froisse had such a terrible relationship. Even though they served the same lord, they were like cats and dogs. She explained that Baroness Froid had been Viscount Lightman's first love. He basically lived like a broken man after she chose another husband. Isabella's father froze, totally bewildered about how she knew this. She smiled and said she really loved reading articles. In her past life, she read everything, including the imperial press and gossip rags. He used to think his daughter was clueless, totally unaware of her real potential. She dropped the bomb that she knew all about the connections between the powerful nobles and the royal family. Bella declared she'd pick her own man, one who has it all. She knew he'd buy that her standards were just as high as his. He stared her down, suggesting she might strike out finding a husband. She shot back that she'd marry whoever he picked. No arguments. The guy finally gave her the go-ahead, but only if she had a reliable chaperone. She was against the Marchioness Richmond, thinking she hadn't accomplished anything. Bella smirked and said they were better off having a few aces up their sleeve. He remembered the second prince really didn't seem interested in Katrina Richmond at all. Isabella saw he was flustered and suggested he go with her mom. He thought it was a solid plan, since it could help smooth things over between Lily and the Emperor. He was digging the fact that she got his attention, so he gave the thumbs up. That same day, Isabella spilled the tea to her mom about her chat with her dad. Lily started freaking out, wondering if she'd been swayed by her father's words. She tried to cook up a believable excuse to keep her mom from getting worried. The girl awkwardly looked away and blurted out that she'd fallen head over heels at first sight. She guessed he was some kind of noble, and said she was totally captivated by his face. Bella gave her the puppy dog eyes and begged her to help her make her debut. Her plea was so heartfelt, Lily just couldn't say no. She closed her eyes, determined to help her daughter get what she wanted. Suddenly, they heard a knock at the door and told whoever it was to come in. The maid quickly apologized, saying someone was here to see Isabella. They couldn't even imagine that the groom himself would show up at their doorstep. The maid exclaimed in surprise that Caden Blake was here to see her. He couldn't help but think that his wife had no idea how impatient he could be. The moment they met, he greeted both ladies with charming politeness. Lily asked him to call her Countess Collins to avoid any complications. He couldn't help but remember how Bella didn't want to use her father's name. That made her realize he remembered their entire conversation, despite everything he'd been through. Lily smiled, remembering the last time she saw him. He was just a kid. The guy thanked her for her concern and said his mana flow was stable now. Lily was happy to hear that and asked what brought him here. Isabella was totally shocked when he said he wanted to see her. Lily couldn't help but think he was the fiancé, but then he mentioned the cat. The woman exchanged a tired look and asked if she'd brought home the wrong cat. He guessed the cat might have run off, since it hadn't been around before. The young man thoughtfully ate a piece of candy, his eyes glued on Bella. It was like he was deliberately trying to fluster her and get her attention. He especially loved watching her blush because of him. He asked to speak with Bella alone so he wouldn't spook the cat. Lily understood the cat gets freaked out by crowds, so she agreed to leave. She whispered to Bella not to be rude and said a mysterious goodbye. The maids were all on edge, telling her to be careful being alone with him. After that, the girl shut the door, trapped in a cage with a monster. She turned and looked at him, like she was searching for an answer. No sooner had she turned around than he was right there, saying it's been too long. She asked if he'd lost his mind, and added that he arrived without a carriage. He replied that it was much faster to fly, and then he snapped his fingers. Caden held out a rose to her and reminded her that he's crazy. He laughed, saying he would have signed the contract sooner if he knew it was this good. Bella turned around, annoyed, and said she had to set the stage first. He just smirked slyly and said he was here for something else. Caden added he wanted it so bad, he couldn't sleep a wink. Isabella couldn't help but think he was talking about a kiss. She wanted to bury her face in her hands, not believing he was such a show-off. Bella had no idea he'd demand she pay up right then and there. She started saying it wasn't the right time, while he was reading her mind. His eyes lit up when he heard her mention the bathroom. She blushed when he asked if she gave Meowser his baths herself. Bella immediately started distracting him, talking about bathing the cat. He moved closer to her ear and whispered that she smelled incredibly good. The guy gazed into her eyes, like he knew everything she was thinking. He asked her to explain what she meant, while she mentally called him a creep. Caden pinned her against the wall and asked what kind of person she thought he was. Isabella suddenly realized that he could hear her thoughts. He sneered, saying that even a demon would be brought to tears by her words. Caden reminded her that she'd already made someone cry and called her a perfect demon bride. Isabella decided not to respond to his words and called the cat over to her. Caden said that it was his duty, as a lesser demon. Isabella decided to change the subject and demanded they discuss future plans. She announced her decision to make her debut in high society. Bella figured they needed to meet as often as possible, and things would just work themselves out. Caden agreed with a flourish and asked when she planned on getting married. He froze when she replied that she needed to wait for offers from other guys. She asked him to think of it as a necessary step to make their romance a reality. Caden said he was willing to play along, since he'd become the leading man anyway. That struck her as odd, since he'd been more cautious before. No sooner did she start wondering why he was being so compliant than he seemed to read her mind. He smirked and suggested she give him a pat on the back, since he was being such a good boy. Bella said it wasn't necessary, but he wasn't having it. She glanced at the guy and couldn't help but notice he kinda looked like a puppy. He grinned when she patted his head and asked her to tell him he was awesome. The girl laughed and called him a good boy. Right after that, he suddenly grabbed her hand and called her sweetheart. With one swift move, he pulled her down, so she landed right on top of him. Caden gave her a hungry look and asked which Lulu she was comparing him to. Isabella was reminded again of her big, sweet dog named Lulu. The guy burst out laughing when he found out it was a dog she had when she was younger. He looked at her flustered face and said she had a hard time keeping her thoughts in check. Bella shoved him away, pissed that he was always pulling this unexpected crap. She said he just reminded her of Lulu, but Lulu was way cuter. He was thrown for a loop when Bella admitted she actually liked his looks. She compared it to appreciating art and told him not to get any ideas. He smirked, thinking she had no clue he was already in the know. All that was on her mind at first was revenge and resentment, which is why she made the deal. He promised to try, knowing he'd just been messing with her this whole time. Isabella added that she wanted to keep meows with her, so they'd have an excuse to meet up. Caden leaned in, all smooth, and whispered he'd leave him with his darling. The next morning, some uninvited guests showed up at the Collins estate. Katrina's kid just barges in, looking for Isabella like he owns the place. Jeffrey Richmond, all huffy, goes, "Seriously? No hello for me?" Bella shoots back, "Not exactly thrilled to see you? Maybe try knocking next time." He's the only son of Marky Richmond, and they've basically been tied at the hip since they were kids. After another jab, he's like, "No one's gonna want to marry a shrew like you." Their banter might sound rough, but they don't exactly do boundaries. Every single argument ends with them both just huffing and puffing like spoiled brats. A couple days after Caden's visit, the maids are all gossiping about how he was totally checking her out. They were convinced he couldn't take his eyes off her. All that attention meant she had to endure a whole day of spa treatments. Ugh. Right then, Jeffrey was bummed, saying she seemed different all of a sudden. It instantly brought her back to her debut prep, all for the sake of getting married. The guy asked her when she started getting into all this regular primping and preening. Bella laughed and told him to get lost, 'cause he wasn't on the candidate list. He ruffled his hair, looking annoyed, and decided to change the subject. Jeffrey surprised her, suddenly holding out a huge box. He blushed and mumbled something about how good shoes take you to good places. The guy figured these shoes would be a symbol of her ending up somewhere great. He saw her surprised face and asked her what she thought. She told him that wasn't something you should say to a girl who's 2 years older than you. Bella laughed at him for almost wishing she'd get lost. Jeffrey got pissed and snatched the shoebox right out of her hands. She thought he was taking back the gift, but he decided to try them on her. He gently held her foot and said she had to give them a spin. Isabella was surprised by her friend's attention, but she didn't say anything. He glanced up at her and said he'd get her another pair if these were too small. Still a little spellbound, Isabella told him they were adorable. The next thing he knew, she gave Jeffrey a radiant smile. The second he saw her smile, all his thoughts just vanished. He tried to hide his blush and said he was just caught off guard. Looks like he didn't even realize she noticed his wound. She gave his hand a worried look. It was covered in this gnarly scab. He immediately hid his palm, saying he'd just cut himself during training. Jeffrey was trying to play it tough, saying everything was fine, but she ordered him to sit down. After that, Isabella grabbed a first aid kit with some disinfectant. The second he winced, she started making fun of him. She added that she was starting to worry about the future of the West with a commander like him. Jeffrey frowned and asked why she'd decided to give up on her dream. He reminded her how she used to always play doctor with him. Isabella reluctantly replied that she was tired of it and wanted to make a name for herself in high society. Mauser watched their conversation calmly, knowing the truth all along. Jeffrey said he'd heard about a lot of real lowlifes in high places. He was talking about guys who acted like they ran the world, but all they really wanted was to get into her pants. She decided to ask him straight up what he was planning, and found out he wanted to escort her. He asked her, dead serious, to go with him to the debutante ball. Looks like his sudden protectiveness definitely wasn't part of her plans. She told him she didn't want him as her date. Jeffrey immediately declared he'd go with her as her bodyguard. He said some weirdos might try to jump her, but she replied she'd take care of them. The guy called her a psycho, after which she asked her question again. He froze, absolutely livid, when she laid out her condition. She wanted him to call her mistress and sincerely beg for her permission. Jeffrey almost refused, but then she casually mentioned she hadn't picked up a scalpel in a while. In the end, he had no choice but to agree. He looked away, totally embarrassed, and said he wanted to follow her lead. Isabella was over the moon when he called her mistress. A few days later, they gathered again in the Collins drawing room. The Marchioness had been rejected as Bella's companion and brought in some famous dressmakers instead. Lily thanked her for the help, saying it would definitely help her prepare. Bella couldn't believe she was trying to assert her power through dresses. Catherine was surprised and said she hadn't seen those shoes before. She decided to play along and said that Jeffrey had given them to her. Catherine was taken aback, since he always used training as an excuse to skip the balls. Bella smiled and guessed it was just a simple act of kindness. Catherine forced a smile and suggested they start with LeBlanc's boutique. The next moment, she showed them a stunning, form-fitting dress. However, it looked so uncomfortable, like your insides were about to explode. She decided in her head that she'd ban corsets when her mom became empress. The seamstress decided to start with flattery, saying Bella was a gem. She added that the girl looked exactly like Countess Collins. A smile crept across her face when LeBlanc admitted that Lily was her childhood idol. Catherine couldn't stomach another second of praise directed at anyone but her. She snapped her fingers and announced that her 4 boutiques were next. Lady LeBlanc apologized and promised to get everything ready ASAP. These 5 boutiques were every bit as amazing as their reputation. They presented her with a lavish ball gown, fit for a princess. The boutiques also offered empire waist dresses worthy of a mythical goddess. After a lengthy fitting, Lily cheerfully complimented her daughter. Catherine decided to cut to the chase and asked if she liked anything. Bella saw her smile and knew she could call these dresses gorgeous. Still, she made it clear she didn't like any of them. She rolled her eyes, bored, and said nothing caught her attention. The girl added they lacked the certain je ne sais quoi that Colin's expensive taste demands. She was loving watching Katrina's blood boil. In most families, you just went along with whatever the head of the family decided, especially when it came to debuts. Lily awkwardly apologized for her daughter being so picky. Unfortunately for Katrina, nobody was backing her up. She internally ripped Lily a new one, then said she'd give her a few days to reconsider. The woman gave her a warm smile and thanked her for that. They both agreed they had some errands to run and needed to head out. Lily left them alone after Catherine asked her to head out first. The second the door shut, the smile vanished from her face like it never existed. She turned to Isabella and told her there was no point in looking at any other boutiques. The woman declared she'd ruin the reputation of any boutique that dared make her a dress. Isabella froze when she felt a hand on her shoulder. The maid smiled and told her to apologize to the lady, and quick about it. Tilda chimed in, saying Bella clearly didn't know anything about fashion, and smirked. Bella shot up and said people would be thrilled if she showed up with absolutely nothing to wear. Catherine scoffed and called it trashy, that she had absolutely no shame. Bella retorted that she couldn't compete with someone who parades around someone else's house practically naked. She smirked, all smug, and asked if she didn't agree with that. Catherine clenched her fist and snapped, "Don't push me!" She swung her arm back, ready to slap her good. The woman froze, startled, when she heard Lily's voice behind her. Her voice turned icy as she demanded, "What the hell is going on here?" Catherine started making excuses, saying how rude Bella had been. The woman waved her silent and turned to her daughter. The girl saw her mother's stern look and said, "I'm sorry." Lily apologized for her daughter's excessive rudeness. She added with disdain that Katrine was way out of line trying to scold her daughter. Catherine shut her mouth when Lily revealed she knew about her visit a couple days back. She pointed out it was the same day Isabella burned her hand. Lily demanded that from now on, she only come around when she's called. Bella remembered that Catherine's mother used to be Princess Lily's nanny. She showered Lily with love, pushing her own daughter to the side. Seeing that, Catherine wondered if she should even bother staying friends with Lily. Looks like she was feeling rejected all over again, just like back then. She was so bummed and ticked off that she just brushed right past the woman. Lily heard Tilda's surprise and snapped at her. The woman tensed up when Lily mentioned she recently became a grandma. She met the owner's gaze and started showering him with compliments. Lily told her she should take advantage of this and spend time with her grandson. She added that starting tomorrow, there was no need for her to come to work. Tilda tried to object, but Lily was just surprised by her own foolishness. She couldn't believe she was only now realizing such simple truths. Tilda threw herself at her feet, but Lily ordered her to run to her mistress. She was beyond frustrated when Tilda kept begging for forgiveness. The maid realized there wasn't even a hint of a smile on her face anymore. She got wary when she noticed another maid showing up. She announced that the lady's bath was ready, and then caught Tilda's eye. The girl made it look like the vase just slipped right out of her hands and onto the servant. Tilda, pissed, demanded to know what the hell she thought she was doing. She clumsily apologized, all the while plotting revenge for Isabella. The maid jumped up furious and latched onto her uniform. Lily walked over and asked Alice if that's really how it went down. She handed Tilda a towel and ordered her to pass her duties on to Alice. The woman smiled and asked if Isabella's bath was ready. Her smile widened, and then she asked them to get one ready for her too. Alice was over the moon when the mistress called her head maid. Isabella was genuinely thrilled that things had worked out this way. They were in the bathroom, talking about Katrina coming back after a while. Isabella gave her mom a thoughtful look and asked her to explain. The woman glanced at the maids and said she just had a feeling about it. Bella suddenly noticed a look of sadness come over her mother's face. Their friendship lasted even after she lost her title as princess. Bella used to judge her mother for turning a blind eye to so much stuff, but now she understood her and realized how much she could tell her. The woman noticed her daughter's confusion and figured she was upset about the dress. She stroked her daughter's face and said she was really sorry. Isabella didn't even know why, but that touch just made the tears start flowing. She had no clue that Lily was the one who asked Catherine to call the tailors. Bella said she was picky and that she already had a dress in mind. A few days later, they held another fitting in Bella's room. The maid, Jenna, was shocked that they were asking her for a favor. It was a joy for her just to sit at the same table with them, let alone do them a favor. Bella said she couldn't order her to do anything, only ask. Jenna was stunned that she knew about her mother, Olivia. Lily gave her nosy daughter a meaningful look. She decided to take the heat and confessed that she was the one who told her. Lily said that she was the one who revealed the unfair circumstances surrounding her mother's passing. Olivia was a maid, just like me, and she died on the job. They first met when Lily was coming back from the Demon War. She fell in a muddy puddle, but Olivia helped her out and gave her some clothes. Lily knew talent when she saw it, so she asked her to make her debut dress. The dress she made for the princess blew high society away. That's how Olivia became famous and rich. Her boutique went under when Lily lost her princess status. High society was constantly bad-mouthing her, spreading rumors left and right. Olivia couldn't handle the stress and passed away, so Lily took in her daughter. Bella remembered Jenna used to sew dresses for toys. She used to make these for Bella, back when she'd lock herself in her room with books. Isabella gave a warm smile and said she really loved the dresses that were made for her. Jenna froze when Bella said she was just like her mother. Looks like she was about to make an offer you couldn't refuse. Jenna was floored when Bella asked her to sew a dress. They went into the room where all of Lily's dresses were kept. Bella was prepared for Jenna to just alter one of them. The maid smiled and said that she'd like to create a new dress. Bella was deep in thought when Jenna asked about the style of the dress. She noticed one of her mother's dresses. Jenna realized it was the dress she'd sewn for the teddy bear earlier. She'd based it on Princess Lily's dress. The woman walked over and said she'd worn it on New Year's Eve. She looked at the dress with a wistful smile, saying that's when she fell for Damien. She felt like it was destiny, meeting a guy like him. She said she was lucky that, because of all that, she got such an amazing daughter. Jenna said making the dress would take about 10 days. Lily promised to cover her duties and asked if she needed anything else. Jenna thought for a second, then asked if she could call in some favors from friends. She admitted that these people used to work at her mom's boutique. Bella agreed instantly and asked if they could come over right away. The girl said sadly that it was tough for them to find work these days. Bella couldn't help but recall Katrina's words after the fitting. It made her think that the girl had pulled something like this before. She promised to pay handsomely for the work and asked her to focus. Jenna promised she'd do everything in her power for the sake of that dress. That same day, Damian Collins was signing yet another document. He'd already learned that Bella had turned down all the big-name boutiques. Lily asked him to come over and sit down for a cup of tea. Damian started talking about how it was Lily's job to bring that brat to her senses. Lily just coolly told him he needed to step up and do his part too. She reminded him about their deal to have tea together once a week, but he'd been MIA. She wanted to know when he got so chummy with Katrina that he was calling her by her first name. Her icy stare sent a chill right down Damian's spine. He decided to dodge that question and just did what she asked. No arguments. Damian tried to play it off, saying he slipped up and called her by her first name on accident. He quickly changed the subject, saying the tea was actually really good. Damian suggested she just talk to Bella to work things out. Lily shot back that she couldn't force her to wear something she hated. He couldn't wrap his head around why Bella was being so stubborn about it. Lily just smiled and said it's 'cause she's his daughter, you know? She added that our girl's gonna figure things out for herself and deal with whatever comes after. The woman pleaded with him to trust Bella, saying she's sharper than most people give her credit for. The guy perked right up when he heard Bella wanted to come home. Meanwhile, the girl was actually standing right outside their bedroom door. He was totally floored when he saw her wearing that dress. It was so gorgeous. It instantly took him back to the good old days. He was just now realizing how much she takes after her mom. So, a few days had passed since the dress got the thumbs up. Meows asked if she'd forgotten that she agreed to spill the beans after a year. Bella calmly chewed her food and said she hadn't forgotten about it. The guy smirked and asked why she was still sitting around doing nothing. The girl snapped her book shut with a smile, saying the bait was already set. She told him not to worry, adding that she was already deep in it. Isabella turned around, pleased, when she heard Benjamin's voice. That guy was a Collins family man through and through. Stepping into the room, he immediately noticed she was just eating fruit. He was sharp and diligent. Just what you'd expect from someone working for them. She replied that she had to watch her figure and asked what brought him there. The man calmly replied that her father wished to have breakfast with her. She acted all surprised that he was waiting for her in the conservatory. Looks like he couldn't even be bothered to ask if she wanted to have breakfast with him. She asked for Alice to be called to her room so she could change. Right after that, Benjamin headed back to the conservatory. It had been a solid 2 hours since they talked, and she still hadn't shown up. Your humble servant here didn't even know why she was taking so long. The next thing he knew, he heard her apologizing for being late. He said he didn't give a damn what she wore to breakfast. The girl put on a sad face and agreed to his demand. The second she sat down at the table, the servants started bringing out a ton of new dishes. Damien found it weird seeing his daughter being so agreeable. He couldn't figure out why she was crying after burning her hand, and why she insisted on wearing that dress. The guy decided not to overthink it, and just asked her straight up. He asked if she knew what kind of dress she'd worn last time. Isabella answered that her mother wore that dress to the New Year's ball. The man froze when she specified that was the day they met. After a short pause, he asked if Lily had made her wear it. She smiled and replied that she chose what would best suit their family. The girl smiled proudly and said that she wanted more than just a husband. She declared her target was the emperor himself, David von Leonard II. Isabella glanced at her father, like she was waiting to see how he'd react. To her surprise, he just laughed and said her joke had gone way too far. He asked her how she even planned on getting close to the emperor himself. Damien couldn't even imagine what he'd think of Lily if he saw Bella. He turned away, lost in thought, and called it the most ridiculous nonsense. Ever since the crown prince kicked the bucket, the emperor's been needing his daughter. The emperor wasn't about to name the grown-up second prince as his heir. Damien gave his daughter a look, not believing she'd thought all this through. He cleared his throat calmly and asked if she was sure about this whole thing. Isabella proudly stated that she definitely knew what she shouldn't be doing. She knew the main event in the power struggle was getting closer. The girl pointed a finger up and mentioned Marchioness Richmond. She declared she shouldn't side with that woman. Katrina Richmond was the power core of the party backing the second prince. Bella added that from now on, she'd act to please the emperor. She touched her father's hand and said the emperor needed her mother. Seeing that dress, he'll take it as a sign, sent by his daughter. She implied that a parent always accepts the child who reaches out first. Bella smiled and compared it to when he took her hand. The man smirked and admitted he didn't know how well she understood her responsibilities. Her plan kept him up all night, gnawing at him. He knew that reinstating Lily as princess was the smartest play. It would boost his standing with the elite like tenfold. Even if Isabella falls from grace, it wouldn't really matter. He was sure Katrina would have his back if that happened. Damien decided to watch them from the shadows, then pick the winning side. The hunger for power and riches went to his head, and he laughed. He couldn't help but think back to the day he asked Lily to be his girl. She was unmatched in beauty and fame, and he did everything to get her. The only snag was when she broke things off with the emperor. They cut him off at the knees, business-wise, because he screwed up their deal. That's exactly why he wanted Lily to patch things up with her old man. Back in the greenhouse, he figured Bella would need some cash too. The girl was floored. Couldn't believe she was actually getting it. The guy handed her a blank check and told her to fill it out for whatever she needed. Isabella thanked him sincerely, saying she was over the moon. She was so stoked by his move, she stared at that check for ages. Muser asked if she was seriously that happy about it. The girl grinned and said she'd hit the jackpot playing the poor daughter card. She spun around suddenly, trying to figure out where that weird whistling sound was coming from. The girl clutched the letter to her chest, a dawning realization in her eyes. She shut the window and told him to give her a heads up before Caden shows up again. Meow said he was giving the guy the cold shoulder and had no idea he snuck in here. She cracked open the door and told him it was totally his screw-up. Imagine her surprise when she stepped outside and found absolutely nothing. She started to turn around, about to tell Meows that nobody was out there. Before she could even finish the sentence, her eyes were suddenly covered. Caden kept her view blocked with his big hand. The girl asked him, annoyed, what the heck he thought he was doing. He wrapped his arms around her waist and said he might just get a little fresh. The hell you think you're doing? Isabella snapped, grabbing his arm. You're gonna regret that. He smirked all cocky. What's the big deal if a demon gets a little frisky? Before she knew it, she was pinned against the wall. Caden stared right into her eyes, a real challenge in his gaze. So, how are you gonna punish me? He leaned in close, his breath on her ear. I'm still waiting for an answer, remember? Every move he made was pure, unadulterated lust. He kept pushing it, right up until she shoved him off. Enough! Bella demanded. What the hell are you even doing here? Caden just smiled, all mysterious. I came bearing a gift. This mana stone, he said, is connected to my very being. It'll let me know if you're ever in trouble. He tied it to the fact she couldn't bring Meows to the ball. Bella breathed a sigh of relief, 'cause she thought he just came to mess with her. Caden held out the pendant and told her to look at it in a positive light. She immediately got suspicious when she realized he wanted to put it on her. He implied she couldn't do it herself without any mana. Hearing that, Isabella decided to let him do it after all. She told him to quit laughing and just put it on already. Isabella saw the look in his eyes and realized his instinctive behavior could get dicey. She shivered when she felt his hot breath near her ear. He fastened the necklace in a second that felt like forever. They spun around the second they heard the cat meow. Bella was surprised to see Jeffrey trying to pet it. The guy was racking his brain, wondering where Bella had wandered off to again. The girl flinched back from the windows, almost without thinking. She yanked Caden out of the way, just in time to avoid being spotted. Bella looked away, quietly asking what they should do now. Just a few seconds later, Jeffrey threw open the doors. He figured Bella might be outside, but she was nowhere to be seen. Little did he know, his friend was soaring above the city in the arms of a demon. Caden grinned and asked if that was enough to spook her. He was surprised she'd even considered the possibility of falling. Caden pulled her closer, like he wanted to show her she was safe. Her heart was pounding, like it was about to jump out of her chest. She clung to him even tighter, like she wanted him to feel what she was feeling. He couldn't figure out why his body was reacting to her so intensely. He kept getting this urge to, get a little too close to her neck. He tried to chill out and asked her to name a place she'd love to visit. She immediately remembered how much she wanted to see the top of the clock tower. Caden instantly flapped his wings, eager to make her wish come true. After a while, they finally reached the top of the tower. Bella was totally mesmerized by the view. She was caught off guard when Caden suddenly brought up that other guy. Meows once mentioned, when he was around, that he'd seen some pink-haired hanger-on. He was convinced Bella didn't buy the whole childhood friends thing between a guy and a girl. Caden was staking his claim, reminding her about their little agreement. Dude seriously didn't believe there was nothing going on between Isabella and Jeffrey. She was about to launch into another excuse, but stopped herself. She blurted out, asking if he couldn't just read her freaking mind already. She figured he should already know what a total tool she thought Jeffrey was. Caden shot back that he didn't like the fact he was even thinking about his wife. Period. He cornered the girl and told her all men were just disgusting, low-life scumbags. After that, he started wondering when he'd stopped hearing her thoughts. Isabella smiled and asked him if he thought he was one of them too. He was taken aback, and then she repeated her question. She suddenly declared it wasn't really fair to think that way about Jeffrey. He was about to protest, but her laughter just shut him down completely. The whole thing suddenly seemed so ridiculous that he cracked a smile himself. He remembered finding out that this leech had volunteered to be her guardian and bring the shoes. After saying that, he added that she shouldn't wear those shoes to the ball. He kept pressing her, asking how close they really were. Bella didn't get why he was being so hostile towards a guy who meant nothing to her. Out of nowhere, Caden touched her face and asked what about him. The girl couldn't figure out why she wasn't even mad at his crazy talk. The second he was near, she felt like it was an emergency. Meows told Caden that the pink-haired leech had put together a search party. Meows looked down and called Caden a bonehead for snatching her. Caden told Bella about it and suggested they take care of the problem. He was stunned by her nonchalance when she suggested wiping memories. He said he couldn't erase the memories of multiple people at once, not yet anyway. Bella touched his shoulder and told him to just wipe one person's memory. She mentioned Jeffrey was the only one who didn't spot her in the room. Isabella gave Caden a thoughtful look, noticing the way he was staring. He asked, sounding a little bummed, why she never used his name. Caden tried to play it cool, but she could see he was flustered. The girl smiled and promised to use it. When they were alone, Caden accepted his fate and opened his arms wide for her. He said she'd have to hug him tight, or he'd just end up carrying her like a sack of potatoes. Isabella blushed, like she'd completely forgotten their wild ride up the tower. Caden kept coaxing her over, like a playful little rascal. He pulled her close and showed her exactly how he wanted her to hold on. The guy grinned and told her to keep her eyes shut from takeoff to landing. Bella eyed her companion and told him not to hurt Jeffrey. The next second, he took off so fast feathers rained from his wings. Meanwhile, Jeffrey kept scouring the area, totally beat. He froze, stunned, when he heard a voice he didn't recognize. Jeffrey pressed his sword to the guy's throat and demanded to know where Bella was. He thought to himself that he'd never forgive him if even a single hair on her head was harmed. No sooner had he thought it than the guy called Jeffrey a real piece of work. He touched the blade and said that to him. Jeffrey was just a pesky little fly. Before he knew it, Jeffrey's body started feeling weirdly weak. Caden stepped up to him and told him to lay off his wife. A couple minutes later, the search party found their commander. Caden and Isabella watched what was happening, eyes glued to the scene. The guy suddenly pointed out she was shaking and asked if she was all right. He totally spaced that it gets cold outside at night. The girl smiled and said she'd feel better once she got some shut-eye. Caden sighed, racking his brain why he couldn't read her mind. He apologized and said she needed to warm up. The demon covered the girl with a blanket. Hoping he hadn't messed things up for her, Bella turned to Lord Meowser and asked him to check if anyone was coming their way. The cat said she was asking for a lot, but he ran off to do it anyway. The second they were alone, Isabella turned to the guy. She stroked his face and smiled, saying she had a blast today. She was pretty sure he already knew, but she wanted to say it anyway. Bella was genuinely grateful, 'cause she couldn't have experienced any of this without him. Like he was hypnotized, Caden asked if she thought it was pathetic. He squeezed her hand tighter and asked if she thought he was some kind of monster. Isabella smiled and said she definitely didn't think so. She looked into his eyes and said he was just who he was. He couldn't help but remember getting sick while locked up in that magic tower. He was lonely until he suddenly felt warmth. Someone's hand was soothingly stroking his head, promising that everything would be all right. He remembered that blonde hair and realized his feelings were the same now. After that incident, he went back to his tower. He learned from Mauser that Jeffrey explained his mistake by saying he was tired from work. He was thinking again about the bright, radiant, and touching name of Isabella. During their first meeting, he listened to her story out of pure curiosity. That night, it was like he was looking at pure, pristine snow. Maybe that's why it always stirred up certain desires within him. It always made him feel better when he heard her sweet thoughts. Just thinking about it made him crack up again. He started wondering why he couldn't read Bella's mind. His unique demon power was mind reading after all. He was bummed because he loved messing with Bella. Suddenly, Caden wondered if his powers might not work under certain special conditions. He snapped out of his thoughts when he heard Meowser's voice. He said Isabella had a message for him. Meowser, in a squeaky voice, mocked, "Wanna come hang out and blow some cash?" Guess his humor helped lighten the mood a little. The next morning, they headed to a trading company up north. Isabella introduced herself to the stranger with confidence. He apologized for not recognizing the princess's daughter right away. This guy was Duke Blake's vassal and ran the biggest trading company around. He practically purred, saying it would be an honor if she called him Baron Harfin. The next second, Caden cut him off, not letting him get any further with the flirting. The guy harshly reminded him they didn't have time for pleasantries. The man led them into a room for showcasing their best merchandise. He explained that they don't buy goods in the capital. They make everything here. Baron Harfin proudly added that their company handles all the importing. He quietly mentioned they managed to import a huge amount of goods ahead of time. Caden pushed again, trying to get him to back off Isabella already. Every time, he was blown away by how persistent this hustler was. Bella froze, waiting for a whole load of top-tier stuff. The next second, she spotted a ton of amazing shoes. She wasn't even expecting to have to choose from so many options. Caden said he got them for her, 'cause he knows she's got a thing for shoes. He gently held her foot, ready to slip on a new shoe. Isabella definitely wasn't expecting him to be so attentive. She wanted to tell him to stop, but he'd already put the shoe on. He smiled and said these ones suited her way better than the others. The guy was totally checking her out, going on about how gorgeous she looked. Bella was trying to hint that they were starting to attract some attention. She was shocked when he held up her shoe and said it was completely ruined. Looks like he trashed those shoes Jeffrey gave her on purpose. He went on about how their connection gets messed up when something tainted touches her feet. Caden proudly announced that from now on, she'll only wear stuff he gets her. With all that jealousy, he was acting more like a dog than a demon. She smiled, not believing they were having such a ridiculous argument. In the end, she just went along with everything he wanted. Baron Harfin was super stoked to have customers like them. Caden smirked, saying he hoped he knew how to keep his mouth shut. He said everything he'd seen today was strictly off the record. The baronet grinned, saying he wouldn't dream of breathing a word. Caden winked, adding that he was suddenly feeling super wiped. The girl called him an idiot and demanded he keep it down. Caden noticed the Baron's weird reaction, but he immediately pretended he hadn't heard anything. Caden gave a knowing smile and repeated the Baron's words to the girl. Isabella laughed awkwardly, saying the Baron didn't really have a choice. In the end, he still decided to buy her a whole bunch of stuff. The baronet blushed when he saw their unusual dynamic. He was stoked when Bella said this was a good idea. She glanced down and caught Caden giving her this hungry but sweet look. The way he was looking at her and smiling felt like a bit much. He was so damn attractive, she just wanted to reach out and touch his face. She pulled her hand back at the last second and asked if he brought what she asked for. It was a monostone, the kind you can only find on Blake territory. They only mine a small amount, so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Still, to the heir, the stone wasn't anything special. He gripped the stone tighter when she said she wanted to make it into a brooch. Caden shot up, realizing she wanted to give it to her father as a gift. To his surprise, she added that now was the perfect time to set the trap. She said she came here to get her hands on the Collins fortune. Isabella leaned close to his ear and asked if he thought it was a good plan. After that, she confidently said she'd cover everything with her check. The baronet couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the blank check. He was about to start adding it all up, but she offered to write in the amount herself. The baronet kept peeking to see how much she was willing to shell out. He couldn't believe his eyes when she wrote down 200 million gold. The guy didn't get it, since all the goods didn't even add up to 3 million. It dawned on him that Isabella was planning to pocket the rest of the cash. This kind of scam was pretty common among the other nobles. Caden tried to offer to pay himself, but she refused. He said it wouldn't be a gift if she paid for everything. Looks like Caden still didn't get why she was doing this. The Baron thought he'd taken care of the payment and gave her a monostone. It was the first time he'd seen the usually stern Caden so carefree. It led him to believe that he was head over heels for Isabella. He smirked and said he needed to send everything to the capital after them. A few days later, Demian Collins summoned his daughter again. The man asked her how well her preparations were going. Isabella smiled dreamily and said everything was good because of him. He just said that 200 million ought to cover it. Isabella wasn't surprised, since she expected something like that from him. He stated that he'd like to see everything she bought with the money. The next second, servants hauled a mountain of jewelry and gloves into the room. He was blown away by the insane amount of shoes and clothes. Still, she managed to buy exactly what he expected her to. Isabella was surprised when he asked if that was all. She also mentioned the necklace she was wearing, and one more gift. The girl placed a fancy little chest with a unique brooch on the table. The guy turned the brooch over in his hands, the one she'd bought him. He just couldn't figure out why she'd even bother getting him a gift. She smirked when he started badmouthing the useless trinket. Isabella stepped up to her father and told him it wasn't a ruby, but a monostone. She gave Damien a proud look and suggested they talk in private. He was floored, since those stones were only found in tiny amounts. The man immediately ordered the servants to clear the room. He started in on her, saying she should have come up with a more believable story. Isabella knew he'd think that, so she offered to run a test. The second the solution hit the stone, it lit up like a Christmas tree. She explained what the solution was and suggested he verify it later. Her father was so shocked, it completely knocked the wind out of him. She reminded him that she'd just brought Lord Blake's cat not long ago. Damien immediately realized that Blake had taken her to the merchant to help with the preparations. The second she mentioned he was also staying in the capital, he remembered his age. At first, he figured he'd come to find a partner too. That blew his mind, since the North's always been so isolated because of their politics. Lord Caden Blake's father never showed his face in high society. That's why it was such a shock to him that Caden had come to the capital. It immediately made him think they'd had a change of heart. Isabella figured they're looking to muscle in on the capital. She got a kick out of seeing her dad try to wrap his head around all this. The girl said she suggested he craft some jewelry out of mana stones. She added that in return, he gave her this crazy-looking brooch. She implied that those 200 million were an investment in the Blake's operation. The girl suggested they jump in early and become business partners. She also mentioned their holdings are smack dab between the capital and the demon realm. Isabella held out the brooch and said the stones soaked in sleep magic. She remembered her dad had some real trouble catching Z's. The girl smiled sweetly and said he'd only have sweet dreams from now on. She silently hoped he'd enjoy them while he could, before he went to the bad place. The days flew by, faster and faster, until the big debut finally arrived. On the day of Isabella's debut, Jeffrey came to see her. He thanked Lily for taking care of him and said he'd gotten some good rest. The woman remembered he'd been hallucinating from overwork. She patted his shoulder and told him not to push himself so hard. Jeffrey froze, surprised when he heard loud footsteps. He immediately greeted Earl Collins. Turns out Lily couldn't go with Isabella and asked him to go instead. She felt uneasy showing up at the palace, so she decided to stay behind. Jeffrey told them not to worry, promising he'd take care of any trouble. Everyone held their breath as they heard Bella coming. She greeted them with a smile, like she was a real angel. The girl went straight to her mother and asked how she looked today. Lily felt tears coming and wondered when she'd grown up so fast. Bella smiled and held out her arms, asking for a big hug. She didn't care if she messed up her outfit or not. She looked into her mother's worried blue eyes. The girl was only more convinced that she was worrying more than she was. Lily hugged her daughter tight and apologized for not being able to go with her. Bella took it all in stride, silently vowing to set things right. She promised to reclaim her rightful title and the family she loved. Isabella looked at her smile again, silently pleading for strength. She said her goodbyes, ready to execute a crucial part of her plan. On the way to the carriage, she asked if her father had slept well last night. The man smiled and said he felt refreshed and rejuvenated. After testing the Mana Stone, he knew he couldn't let an opportunity like that slip away. He never imagined his daughter was so savvy when it came to this kind of thing. Damien remembered their first conversation, when they discussed the engagement. That day, she said she'd let him decide who her husband would be. With those thoughts, they finally headed to the main palace. Caden stood pensively in the main hall, like he didn't belong there. He could feel the women staring, and wondered when his wife would arrive. All they did was whisper about how good-looking he was. A lot of the ladies thought he was way hotter than the rumors said. One of the ladies was shocked that he picked up on what she was thinking. Still, all their looks just filled him with contempt. Society used to point fingers at him just because he was the demon's son. Now they were all over him, trying to get his attention. He couldn't read Isabella's mind anymore, but he hoped she'd show up soon. All Caden could hear was the sound of his own blood rushing, trying to figure out what was going on in her head. Meanwhile, she was already working the room, greeting all the nobles. She kept it cool and professional, until she felt his eyes on her. Isabella greeted him with a soft smile, one that just about melted him on the spot. She sighed, a little bummed, when she saw Jeffrey tailing her. She told him he was cramping her style and asked him to give her some space. She was floored when Caden reached out and started a conversation himself. And just like that, the evening she'd been waiting for finally kicked off. No sooner had they stepped away than Jeffrey started grilling her about how they knew each other. She didn't want to get into it and reminded him that she'd asked for some breathing room. He tried to excuse himself, saying he was thirsty, but she demanded they leave again. Her fiery temper was really starting to get on his nerves. He was surprised she was willing to go see that guy, knowing all the rumors about him. Isabella didn't immediately realize he was talking about Caden. Jeffrey got pissed and asked if she knew he'd gone off the deep end because of the monster energy. He thought it was fishy that Caden was suddenly showing his face in public. To his shock, Bella remembered people thinking Jeffrey was a smart and considerate dude. She gave him a sweet smile and said rumors can be deceiving. I don't think Jeffrey immediately caught her drift. As soon as he figured it out, his face flushed with anger. He asked if she seriously thought his blood-red eyes were normal. Isabella just smiled and said she had pretty weird tastes. Jeffrey kept hassling her, because he thought she'd lost her mind. Isabella was like a sister to him, and he couldn't let her fall into the hands of some lowlife. He figured she should be with someone he could at least respect. All this was pissing him off so much, he didn't even notice Caden. His eyes almost popped out of his head when he saw that creep. He couldn't believe he'd managed to snag Isabella right under his nose. Jeffrey decided to step up and reached out his hand to introduce himself. But when he opened his eyes, they were already long gone. Looks like that move just buried the hatchet with Jeffrey Richmond. The second they were alone, Caden hit her up for a reward for saving her from that Klingon. Bella blushed and told him to let her go. Didn't want to start any rumors. Caden, all apologetic, said he was sorry, but he just couldn't wait any longer. He reminded her how everyone was staring, hinting it was past the point of no return. The guy called her unbelievably gorgeous and confessed he'd even been tempted to snatch her away. All those sweet nothings turned Isabella's cheeks a lovely shade of pink. He was trying to let her know that the feeling was mutual. They both stumbled a bit when they heard the Emperor was on his way. Next thing you know, Lily's dad, His Imperial Majesty, walks into the room. His servant immediately confirmed that Bella was indeed here earlier. The guy froze, waiting, when the servant dropped a bomb. They said Isabella arrived with none other than that scumbag Count Collins. Even after all these years, he still thought of him as one ballsy son of a gun. He could have just sent Bella with someone else, but he actually showed up himself. Isabella found her father right away, when the servant told her to get ready. Everyone was shocked that the Emperor decided to officiate the ceremony himself. It was common knowledge that he hadn't officially recognized Prince Esther as his heir yet. Isabella saw the greedy look in her father's eyes and knew everything was going according to plan. The Emperor's servant called out the debutantes' names one by one. Finally, Isabella Collins' turn came up. They immediately approached the Emperor and lowered their heads. The man gazed thoughtfully at his granddaughter, like he couldn't believe it. He was literally staring at a carbon copy of his beloved daughter, Lily. That dress brought him right back to the first New Year's after the Empress died. Lily saw his sadness and asked if she could help him pick out a dress. She came and talked to her father every day while he was grieving for his wife. Her gentle smile helped him keep it together through the pain of his loss. She'd lost someone she loved too, but she still tried to help him. That day, he told her the dress was beautiful and remembered that her mom loved that color too. Isabella was right. This dress definitely makes an impression. She walked calmly over to her grandfather and kissed his hand. She knew he was admiring how much she looked like her mother. He couldn't figure out why she'd chosen to wear that dress of all things. Isabella decided to twist the knife and introduced herself as Isabella Leonard. Damien praised her for a job well done. Clueless about what she'd actually said to the Emperor, Isabella lied and said she just wished him good health. She smirked, pleased that she'd actually called herself Leonard. The Emperor could punish her for disrespecting the royal family. Still, she had a feeling he wasn't going to. They both spun around when they heard Katrina's voice. She wanted to know how the audience with the Emperor went. Her face twisted with annoyance when Bella mentioned Jeffrey wanted to come with her. Katrina walked up to Damien and said she'd put together a list of candidates for Isabella. Her blood ran cold when she heard Bella decided to pick her own partner. The woman was outraged and demanded to know what he meant by that. Katrina was the only one who got Damien back into high society. She had every right to be furious, considering he was trying to cut her out. Damien said people were watching and left, suggesting they talk about it later. Katrina Richmond was so furious, she was absolutely livid. Right then, she had no choice but to swallow her pride and bail. Bella watched her go, hoping she wouldn't cause any more trouble. She happened to overhear them talking about who exactly she was looking for. The girl looked ahead and spotted Caden hanging out with some woman. He felt her gaze and said that the woman had actually been talking about her. Caden kinda put her on the spot, spilling the beans on everything she was trying to dig up. He called it a lucky break that he was there for the same reason as Isabella. He turned around, and just like that, the gossips had vanished. He called them out, but Bella wanted to know why he was spreading rumors about her. She was shocked when he leaned in close and said it was all part of his plan. Caden reminded her the ball was starting soon and asked her for the first dance. Why couldn't he just spit it out and say he fell for her the second he saw her? Isabella didn't want her dad trying to marry her off for some kind of deal. They kept walking, totally missing that they passed right by Jeffrey. He stopped her right there and asked if they were keeping secrets. He greeted Caden again and introduced himself. Jeffrey said he and Bella needed to talk something over, and he'd borrow her for a sec. Caden tried to argue, but Jeffrey made it clear he wasn't a fan. He added that Bella's first dance should be with him, to protect her from the wrong kind of guys. Caden smirked and asked him to just imagine what would happen if he got that first dance. They practically tripped over each other, asking her who she was going to dance with. They were both so pushy, it started to get on her nerves. She got pissed and told them she wasn't dancing with either of them. Then she bolted so fast, they didn't even see her go. She put some distance between them, thinking what complete morons they were. Isabella knew that if things kept going this way, nobody would even come near her. At a debutante ball, a lady can't just hit the dance floor unless a guy asks her. It was tough to find a better way to size up these guys than right here, right now. Sadly, even after 5 songs, no one had asked Bella to dance. She wasn't exactly chopped liver in the marriage market, which made the whole thing feel super weird. A girl happened to overhear Katrina talking with one of the other women. All she did was trash talk Isabella. This dirty move gave Bella the idea that it was time to switch up her plans. Katrina was warning everyone not to invite Bella for the first dance. Looks like Damian Collins turning her down really bruised her ego. Isabella was lost in thought about it until she heard Jeffrey's voice. Katrina tried to stop him, saying that dancing with her could hurt his reputation. She asked if he really wanted to risk the Emperor's wrath over some pointless crush. To her surprise, Jeffrey said he never even wanted those titles in the first place. So, he made it pretty clear he was ready to go against his own mother. Caden beat him to it, saying he greased some palms to change the music. He got down on one knee and asked her to grant him this dance. Isabella had no choice but to accept his invitation. He asked her what she would have done if they hadn't made a deal. Isabella stayed silent, wondering why he was doing all this. She couldn't tell if he was just doing his job or trying to sweep her off her feet. She knew for sure he was trouble, and being around him might make her forget about getting even. Caden smirked and suggested breaking tradition by dancing one more time. Isabella was reminded of her dog again, always sticking to her like glue. She told him to be patient and said she'd be back soon. He saw her head over to Jeffrey and realized he really was lower than dirt. Caden hated all the friendly vibes still going on between them. He was torn up inside with the need to have her, to make her his. He couldn't help but think it all started after he gave her his heart. Meanwhile, Isabella was calmly dancing with her old friend. He apologized for all the stuff his mom had been pulling. Isabella looked at her face and figured she wasn't thrilled about their dance. She smiled and suggested the best way to rebel against his mom was through him. After a short pause, he said that's exactly why he wanted to ask her something. He looked her straight in the eye and offered to help her get even for everything. Isabella was taken aback by his offer. She's still his mother. She told him not to even think she'd give him a pat on the back for his sympathy. Isabella locked eyes with him and proposed they use each other. Jeffrey told her not to sweat it and said that's exactly why he followed her. They nodded, stopping their dance. With each passing minute, Caden felt his anger rising. Meanwhile, Katrina Richmond was feeling pretty ashamed about what just went down. She tried to justify it by saying her son was just helping Bella out. The woman definitely wasn't expecting those two to come say hello. She faked a smile at the sight of Isabella, trying to figure out what she was up to. The girl said she didn't even know how to thank her for her kindness. Catherine frowned when she added that she wanted to choose her own husband. She smiled and said she couldn't marry someone she thought of as a brother. All the ladies immediately started gossiping about everything Catherine had told them. Isabella managed to twist things, making it sound like Catherine was deliberately blocking other nobles. She forced a smile and said she'd just sent him to dance with her, that's all. Catherine tried her best to explain, but Jeffrey just rudely walked off. One of the men said he was quite concerned about their family's behavior. Catherine frowned, trying to figure out who this jerk was. Caden hugged Isabella and said he also found her incredibly charming. Isabella felt her cheeks flush red at his words. Caden said he hoped there wouldn't be any more misunderstandings like this in the future. His words hit so hard, everyone went white as a ghost. Those words were the final nail in the coffin for Katrina's reputation. The Blake family's interest made everyone think Isabella was a worthy bride. Caden decided to snatch her away so they could talk in private. The other ladies immediately said their goodbyes to Katrina, making excuses about having things to do. Isabella was thrilled, even though she knew this wasn't enough to turn everyone against Richmond. As soon as they were alone, she said she'd owe him one for today. Caden looked at her and asked if she could handle what he was about to ask. Isabella blushed and told him not to ask for anything weird. He wasn't sure if his urge to tease her was some kind of demonic influence. He'd heard that people possessed by demons never really recovered, but it felt more and more like, in his case, it was the other way around. Meanwhile, a servant was asking the Emperor to return to his chambers. The Emperor just asked if the servant had seen his granddaughter at the ball. The Emperor noticed that no one had asked Bella to dance. Normally, the Marchioness Richmond would have been trying to set her up, but it didn't happen. All these years, he'd been secretly watching over his daughter, Lily. He thought she'd come back, but she never changed her mind, even when she lost everything. The dude was bawling his eyes out, just wrecked that she wasn't ever coming back. After Felix died, he decided not to name an heir, so Astor wouldn't set his sights on Lily. The Emperor told a servant to carefully invite Bella over. He was so blindsided, he had to ask him to repeat himself. The guy just stared him down and said it was the Emperor's orders. As soon as Bella got home, she wanted to talk to her mom about the ball. Turns out, the woman hadn't been able to sleep a wink until her daughter showed up. Isabella suggested she go get some rest in her room. Lily was floored that her daughter was acting like such a kid. Even so, Isabella treasured every single moment they spent together. The woman wanted to know if she'd found a guy she was head over heels for. She was stoked when she heard they even hit the dance floor together. Isabella braced herself for a mixed reaction and dropped Caden's name. To her surprise, all she calmly asked was if she should send over an engagement proposal. Bella confessed that she'd promised to check out a few prospects. Lily was taken aback, hearing she'd done it to avoid an arranged marriage. Isabella grinned and said she was all grown up now. She decided to play along with her dad for a while, pretending to listen. Lily was impressed by her cleverness and asked how the Emperor reacted. Bella decided to leave out the part where he looked like crap because someone was messing with his health. She knew about it because of that novel about the tragic princess. Isabella asked if she'd ever held a grudge against her father. Bella was openly discussing it with her, completely unaware that Caden was eavesdropping on their whole conversation. Lily replied that at first, yeah, she was definitely pissed at him. She also added that she felt let down and hurt that he didn't trust her. But she started to gradually understand him after she became a parent herself. The woman confessed she'd do anything for her daughter. Her voice trembling, she guessed that it must have hurt her father too. Lily hugged Bella and said she had no regrets because she had her. A few days later, Isabella decided to move on to the next phase of the plan. She was totally blindsided when she found her entire house overflowing with gifts. Her desk was covered in invites and bouquets from Katrina's supporters. Her eyes locked onto a black bouquet that stood out from the rest. A black card said he wanted to invite her to dinner. She was taken aback when she saw she was addressed as Isabella Leonard. It instantly clicked. She'd only given that name to two people. One was Caden, and the other was His Imperial Highness. The maid immediately wanted to know what the note said. Bella was thrilled, sensing she'd finally managed to catch the Emperor's eye. She decided not to waste any time and headed to the palace that very day. She was greeted by a suave guy, more like a butler, really. Technically, her letter was sent by the second son of the Jenkins family. The guy kept pushing her to add some wine to the main course. Isabella calmly agreed, getting ready for what was about to go down. On the way to the cellar, she immediately figured he was a loyal servant of the Emperor. He stopped at one of the doors and told her to go on in to grab the wine. Bella walked ahead, knowing it was the perfect way to set up the meet. She instantly saw a gray-haired man sitting at the table. The Emperor took off his cloak and remarked that they were face to face again. The girl bowed respectfully and greeted the ruler of legend. The Emperor, knowing time was short, suggested they cut to the chase. He went straight for it, asking why she was going around calling herself Leonard. Bella had the nerve to bring up his daughter and shamelessly use his family name. He was convinced someone had put her up to this whole thing. Isabella smirked and said that she and her father wanted to bury the hatchet with him. He blew up, asking if she was just her father's puppet, trotted out for show. She just replied that she didn't want him involved in any of it. The Emperor crossed his arms, demanding proof she wasn't part of some scheme. Bella lowered her gaze and said she was risking everything for one reason only. She revealed that Count Collins had taken his daughter from him, severing their bond. On top of that, the guy had the nerve to cheat on his wife with her best friend. Isabella locked eyes with the Emperor and told him she wanted revenge. The Emperor asked if Lily herself knew about her husband's indiscretions. He couldn't believe that even his own daughter knew about his extracurricular activities. Bella added that she knew she had no right to ask for his help in getting even. She mentioned he needed an heir, which put Lily in a very precarious position. Isabella knew just how bold her claims were. Even so, she decided to be honest and lay it all out on the table. The girl looked at her grandfather and asked him to make a deal. Isabella requested her mother's title of princess be reinstated. The guy tried to explain it wasn't as simple as she thought. She suggested she'd marry the Blake heir and set up her mom's divorce. The Emperor immediately remembered she'd danced with him at the ball. This could be an awesome chance to bring the Northern military forces on board. Besides, the North didn't want Prince Astor inheriting the throne. Isabella also mentioned there were a few ways to make a divorce happen. It was allowed if the family couldn't produce an heir. Plus, it covered things like mental instability or going totally broke. Isabella confidently declared she planned to pull out all the stops. It seemed like a tough gig, but the Emperor couldn't pass it up. He promised to bring her mom back if she just fulfilled those two conditions. The guy started to leave the cellar first, but she stopped him right there. Bella smiled and decided to seal the deal with a handshake. He thought she was bold before, but he still saw her as just a kid. He kindly agreed and held out his big hand. Meanwhile, Caden Blake kept on training, fencing like a madman. He kept taking out all his frustration on the knights whenever something ticked him off. What got under his skin was that Bella hadn't contacted him all week. The knight tried to beg for mercy, but he insisted they fight it out. He froze when his father appeared behind him and offered to take his place. Ethan Blake told him to cut loose and come at him with everything he had. Without a word, Caden drew his sword and stepped forward. What followed was a duel the likes of which no knight could ever hope to match. They fought until Caden's sword was sent flying from his grip. The guy told him he needed to use his power for its intended purpose. He thought Caden wasn't fighting, just taking out his anger. The guy told him to go find someone else to mess with and walked away. In that moment, Caden realized for the first time that he couldn't read him. Even though his father was human, he still couldn't figure him out. Meanwhile, Bella had just gotten back to the pharmacy. Dr. Baron Phillips asked her what brought her here. She just calmly replied that she'd come to see her teacher. After that, she decided to cut to the chase and said she was here on urgent business. Baron Phillips hadn't seen her in ages, so this seemed pretty weird to him. The girl stated that it concerned the Emperor's health itself. He reminded her that he was the imperial physician and couldn't talk to outsiders. Isabella decided to handle things differently and slightly opened her bag. She held out some small red mushrooms that looked poisonous. The Baron examined the mushrooms and said he'd never seen anything like them before. These were devil's fungus, only known among knights who hunt monsters. The girl smirked and dared him to prove just how toxic he could be. He jumped back, totally freaked when he realized she wanted to devour him. The guy demanded she spit out that mushroom, like yesterday, but it was too late. She said one mushroom wouldn't do anything and told him to check out his hand. The Baron squinted at his wrist, trying to figure out what she was talking about. She pointed out the crescent moon mark and the warmth radiating from his fingertips. Bella glanced at the physician and mentioned she'd seen those symptoms in the Emperor. The physician asked if she seriously thought the Emperor was messing around with forbidden substances. Bella smiled and suggested he'd been indulging for quite a while now. This mushroom acted like a performance enhancer, but long-term use came with a price. The side effects were brutal: dry mouth, upset stomach, and dizziness. She asked if all those symptoms rang any bells for him. The guy immediately remembered the Emperor complaining a lot lately. He didn't do anything, figured it was just normal stuff for a man his age. The healer mentioned he'd never seen marks like that on someone's fingers, not even today. The girl guessed he must have taken the mushroom after the examination. He checked his schedule and remembered he always drinks tea while reading. Isabella demanded they check the tea, or just ban it altogether. The Baron was still hesitant, but he finally agreed to go along with it. A few days later, Bella headed to Viscount Grissom's masquerade ball. He was a loyal follower of Prince Astor, and she went in Lily's place. She wasn't exactly thrilled about going there with her dad either. Damien decided to break the silence and asked about the Duke's heir. He was surprised to realize that he and Caden were on a first-name basis. Isabella smiled and said that Caden himself had asked her to do that. Damien was stoked that they'd already dropped all the formalities. The Duke Blake's heir made it pretty obvious he was into Bella at the ball. He needed to make sure this marriage happened, especially after he embarrassed Katrina at the ball. Damien was sure the whole family would be on his side if he got some unconventional help. He didn't even notice Bella could read him like a book just by looking at his face. It was already dark when they finally arrived at the masquerade ball. The tables were decked out with ridiculously expensive dishes and food. Bella figured Prince Astor was still salty about not being invited to the debutante ball. This party felt even more over the top than the Emperor's ball. Everyone wearing a mask was single and definitely flaunting it. Tonight, Isabella was playing the part of one of those available ladies. She glanced ahead and spotted the socialite Katrina in the distance. The woman felt Bella's gaze and returned it with a smug smirk. Damien froze up when a familiar guy greeted them. Prince Astor gave a lazy smile and said it had been too long. They immediately greeted him with a respectful bow. He was the lowlife who took advantage of her mother and led her to her grave. She flinched when he asked if this was his niece. Bella greeted him like nothing was wrong, while inside she was burning with hatred. She bit her lip, silently promising to make sure he got what was coming to him. For now, she had to endure that arrogant, piercing gaze. She smiled and said she hoped he continued to enjoy good health. As soon as she got away from the men, Jeffrey approached her. He tried to lower his voice, but Bella recognized him instantly. Isabella asked if he had come to check up on her mom again. He figured his mom was at it again, planting people here. Jeffrey decided to run down the list of suspects for her. First up, the eldest son of Earl Otera, chasing after anything in a skirt. The guy in the green mask was the Viscount Brown's second son, and a total moron. So Katrina set up these ticking time bombs that'll only go off when they get close. She brought in a bunch of lowlifes to screw up her alliance with the Blakes. Jeffrey pointed to the last guy, the one who was a real problem. She followed where he was pointing and saw Caden Blake. He flashed a smile the second he felt her eyes on him. This was the first time they'd locked eyes since the last ball. Caden made a beeline for her the second their eyes met. He called out how that pink-haired dude was all over her again. Jeffrey was taken aback when he asked if the hero could save the princess this time. He kissed her hand and said the princess had already fallen from grace. Caden told Jeffrey to take his righteous indignation elsewhere. Jeffrey tried to argue, but the demon just agreed and said he was definitely planning something. Looks like Caden was enjoying playing the bad guy. Isabella thanked him for the info and said they needed to talk. She told him not to worry about her and suggested they discuss it later. Jeffrey had to suck it up and stomped off, pissed. Isabella watched her huffing friend walk away and asked if he was happy now. Caden said he practically laid out the opportunity for her to find him, and she was flirting with some other dude. Bella flushed red and told him to watch his mouth. The second she said that, music started up in the main hall. The demon smirked, all confidence, and said her first dance would be with him. He was acting so cocky and arrogant, Bella was basically left with no other choice. She decided not to argue and just calmly offered him her hand. Bella asked him to be cool with whatever she decided to do. After the dance, she explained that some guy Katrina sent would be coming to hit on her later. He was surprised she was giving him a heads up about flirting with another guy. Isabella said Prince Aster's been glued to her like white on rice. Caden finally caved when she begged him not to make a scene. He kept to himself that he was going to personally rough up anyone sending letters to his wife. The demon glanced at her and noticed she was wearing the necklace he gave her. He smirked and asked if she liked his demonic heart. He figured she was scared of getting hurt and was counting on him to protect her. For some reason, the fact she wanted his help struck him as incredibly cute. He touched her chin and told her not to worry about a thing. Caden was dying to read her mind, but he just couldn't do it. She touched his chest and admitted she was still a little nervous. Still, she felt safer knowing he was close by. Damien watched the scene in the main hall from a distance. He asked if she was going to keep making things difficult for his daughter. Katrina was furious at how he'd spread his wings after groveling at her feet not long ago. She turned sharply and said the prince wanted to speak with him alone. It seemed to Damien that the prince was now afraid of losing him. He offered him a seat next to him and held out a glass of wine. Prince Aster smiled predatorily and asked how his sister was doing. He sized the man up, remarking that he'd changed a lot lately. Damien tried to hide from the prince how nervous he really was. Aster was wondering what suddenly made Bella so eager to get hitched. He agreed that human emotions are a real head-scratcher. Damien suddenly realized he only had one dog with him today, not two. Aster smirked and said he got rid of the other one for showing its teeth. A chill ran down the guy's spine when he added that he takes good care of those who behave. Meanwhile, Isabella was bracing herself for her suitor's move. She glanced at Bellicotera and decided to play along with his little game. Isabella calmly took the glass from his hand, like she didn't suspect a thing. He just kept laying on the flattery, trying to pull the wool over her eyes. Bellic gave her a sly look and asked if she wasn't going to drink. He started pushing to personally escort her home if she got tipsy. Bella saw his ulterior motive, but still agreed to have a drink. He was over the moon when she said her head was pounding. She subtly swiped someone else's glass from the table and left hers. After that, she followed Belek onto the balcony like nothing was up. He smirked, noticing her glass was almost empty. Isabella blushed and started saying she felt dizzy. She asked him to take off his mask and show his handsome face. Belek couldn't resist the promise of what was to come and took off his mask. Bella went silent, a knowing look on her face, because she'd still had her doubts. She slapped him across the face with everything she had, like their little flirtation never even happened. She went ballistic, ripping into him for using that crap. Isabella remembered he'd pulled this kind of stunt before, and it wrecked his family. She reminded him that his dad was in deep with some shady dealings and helping him out. Belek started yelling about how she was accusing an innocent man. Bella smirked when he demanded she show him some real proof. She thoughtfully picked up her glass and dared him to prove it. She told him to prove his innocence and down the whole thing. Belek's face twisted with disgust and hatred when she said that. The best he could come up with was to knock the glass right out of her hand. The dude thought smashing that glass to smithereens would be his get-out-of-jail-free card. Bella coolly replied that his reaction was a dead giveaway. Belek smirked, all smug, and said he had no idea what she was talking about. He tried to claim the glass just slipped right out of his hand. The guy started going on and on dramatically about how nobody would do something like that. He added that he was just showing his appreciation, and she was accusing him. She laughed when he started talking about how his buddies might react to this whole thing. Bella laid all her cards on the table, admitting that it was someone else's glass. She added that she'd left the drink they gave her in the corner of the ballroom. The girl turned around and said she was going to go check what was in that glass. She remembered her teacher was an expert at identifying poisons. With every word she spoke, Belek felt his fear growing. Bella laughed and called him a curse on the Otter family. Belek kept begging her to calm down and change her mind. Isabella figured he'd never felt this kind of shame before. She wanted to throw him in the slammer, but Katrina probably talked him into messing up her life. The girl froze, thinking about using him. He perked up when she offered to let it slide, just this once. Bella stopped dead in her tracks and said she'd go along with it, but only under one condition. She demanded he tell Katrina he's head over heels for her and can't live without her. Bella was banking on Katrina, thinking her plan was a total win. She made it clear that after all this, he'd better be popping the question. The second he hesitated, she was right there, threatening to make him regret it. Bella added that she'd be expecting a seriously impressive gift to arrive soon. She split, telling him not to hang around there any longer than he had to. As she left, she implied things could get real ugly if anyone else found out about this. After that conversation, Belek Otere was absolutely seeing red. Even though he agreed to the deal, he decided he wasn't going to roll over that easily. Belek figured he could just send someone to take care of this girl. As fate would have it, he bumped right into Caden in the hallway. He recoiled instantly, scared stiff by the evil, arrogant look in his eyes. Caden smirked and said he was the devil himself, walking the earth. Meanwhile, Bella was stoked that everything had gone pretty smoothly. When she was alone, she managed to take out Katrina's little mutts one by one. She was ready to move on to the next. But then she heard that voice she hated behind her. Prince Aster smirked and asked her for one dance. She'd been dodging him all night, but he still managed to catch her off guard. She didn't have any choice but to accept his offer. Every second felt like bugs were crawling all over her skin. She was so disgusted, she could barely keep it together. Bella wanted to crush his blood-soaked hands, but she couldn't. All she could do was force a smile as he poured on the flattery. Aster grinned and said she looked exactly like his sister. She decided to lie when he asked if she'd chosen a husband yet. Aster said he wanted to find a suitable match for his niece. Her blood boiled when he hoped his sister would stay in good health for a long time to come. As soon as the dance ended, Bella bolted. She kept replaying his words, and she felt like it was a threat. Bella tried to get a grip, but panic was setting in. She still felt the raw fear from when he messed up their lives so badly. The thought of something terrible happening was consuming her more and more. She was shaking with panic until she felt a hand on her. Caden gripped her shoulders, like he was trying to snap her back to reality. He tried to ask if she was okay, but her tears spoke volumes. She tried to ask how he was doing, but he just clammed up. Isabella frowned, trying to figure out when she started crying. She quickly turned away and asked him to wait while she pulled herself together. Bella tried to wipe away the tears, but they just kept coming. Caden could see how badly she was shaking as she wiped her eyes. All he could do was take off his jacket and try to warm her up. He gently draped his jacket over her shoulders, like he was saying she wasn't alone in this. Caden stroked her cheek and said they should grab something sweet. He didn't give her a second to think, just tugged her hand toward the exit. The dude wasn't about to spill where he was dragging her off to. Isabella tried to argue she wasn't that tipsy, and they should head back. Caden smirked and told her she was totally hammered and needed to eat something with him. The girl grudgingly accepted her fate and shut her mouth. A couple seconds later, she whined that her feet were killing her and she couldn't walk anymore. The demon spotted the nearest bench and agreed to stop for a sec. Bella perked up, thinking they'd be heading back any minute now. Much to her dismay, Caden just scooped her up in his arms and refused. The next thing she knew, he spread his wings, and they were soaring into the sky. Isabella realized, yet again, that she could never get used to something like this. Caden just smirked and said a demon king had to kidnap a princess, right? He completely ignored her struggling and just told her to look ahead. The girl was stunned when she saw the massive moon. In that moment, she felt the cool wind caressing her skin. She turned her head and felt Caden's breath and body heat. The moment felt so surreal. She held onto him tighter. Looks like Caden was starting to pick up on what Bella was thinking too. His cheeks flushed, and his heart started pounding like crazy. They kept soaring through the sky, listening to the rhythm of their hearts. Bella's heart was beating so loud, she was worried he could hear it. A minute later, Caden finally threw open the door to his room. Isabella didn't immediately realize she was in the place where it all started. She nervously asked him how she was going to get home later. Caden just gripped the collar of his shirt and said he wanted to change. He looked away playfully and asked if she was just going to stand there. The demon smirked and suggested she watch him get undressed. He kept teasing her, reminding her about the first time she saw him. You know? The second he brought up her stripping him, she booked it out of there. Caden smirked and told her to stick around inside where it was warm. He moved behind her and noticed she was looking a little perkier. He was way happier seeing that than watching her stand there bawling. Seeing tears from a woman who wouldn't flinch, staring death in the face, just froze him solid. She'd been so confident and tough before, but something had really gotten to her. Isabella was lost in thought, waiting for him to finally get changed. Caden gently touched her shoulders and let her know he was done. He leaned in close to her ear and saw it had gone all red from his breath. The demon grinned and suggested maybe she should change her clothes too. With every word he said, Bella's face burned brighter and brighter. The next second he backed off, promising he wouldn't. You know, he figured she could barely breathe in that dress and left her some clothes. For the first time, Isabella was shocked to realize he actually cared about her. He froze halfway to the door when she called out to him, all flustered. Bella turned her burning face away and mumbled she couldn't get it off herself. Shame washed over her as she asked him for a little help. Caden smirked and asked if she really wanted him to undress her. Isabella pushed her gorgeous hair aside and asked him to untie the bow in the back. That move was so damn alluring, even Caden started blushing. Looks like Bella was surprised that she caught him blushing. He touched the ribbon and asked if all he had to do was untie it. Turns out, untying a simple ribbon was proving to be a real pain. Isabella started rushing him, which just made him even more nervous. He was fiddling with the ends of the bow, like he had no clue what to do. Isabella looked like she was about to kill him when he tightened the ribbon. He finally managed to wrestle that thing open, eventually. She felt this incredible rush when the corset finally loosened up. Before she knew it, she was pressed up against the demon with her bare back. After that, he finally left the room so she could change. She got up slowly, wondering why he wasn't coming back inside. Bella started to walk forward, but stopped in front of the mirror. She couldn't help but think about how his shirt came down to her knees. Even the sleeves were so long, she had to roll them up twice. She pressed her hand against the mirror and imagined what Caden was thinking, standing in front of it. She wondered what it felt like for him, going through that transformation. She turned around and told him to come in when she heard the knock. The girl wasn't expecting the, guy to bring her a whole freaking dinner. He admitted he remembered she hadn't eaten anything all day. Bella had been so stressed out all day, she just didn't have an appetite. She picked up the bowl and dug into the delicious soup. Caden told her he'd had to learn to cook just to survive. He playfully asked if that was enough to qualify him as her husband. He kinda reminded her of a puppy, waiting for his owner to praise him. As soon as she finished eating, she flopped onto the bed and thanked him for dinner. To her surprise, that wasn't the only thing the guy had prepared. She was shocked he'd even managed to whip up dessert. He offered her a piece of candy, but Bella thought it was way too sweet. Caden gave her a charming smile and held out a glass of wine. Isabella realized for the first time that wine and chocolate were a match made in heaven. He confessed he used to eat this stuff all the time when the pain kept him up at night. Bella felt a pang of sadness and asked if he'd felt that pain even before he became a demon. Caden replied that he didn't remember much, because he was totally out of it back then. Looking back, he thinks he just needed something to hate, someone to be pissed at. Stuck here all alone, he just kept hating himself over and over. Isabella looked into his eyes and said he was just Caden, not a demon, not a human, just him. He was surprised she was trying to help, and admitted she had a point. The demon confessed he felt like he could breathe again after she called out to him. It felt good knowing he was just Caden, not some cursed heir to a messed up legacy. He thought he wanted to check out, but really, he just wanted to live. Bella got him like nobody else, because she hated her life too. She figured their souls were kindred spirits, and squeezed his hand tight. After chatting for a bit, Isabella felt wiped out and crashed. The whole time, Caden just chilled next to her, guarding her sleep. He dug watching her sleep so quiet and peaceful. At moments like that, she seemed even more gorgeous than usual. The next morning, the girl barely pried open her heavy-ass eyelids. She remembered she was in the magic tower and bolted upright. She was totally thrown when she realized she was in her own room. She touched Caden's shirt collar and wondered how she'd gotten back. Her dad figured out she'd ditched the banquet early. Isabella looked away, saying she was just a little tired. He told her, real icy, to let him know next time. His reaction seemed way too chill, considering he was looking for her. She was positive someone had seen her with Caden. Bella figured her dad was just waiting for her to marry into the Blakes. Guess that's why he didn't give her any grief. Back in her room, Mazur chewed her out for not coming home last night. He called her irresponsible for staying out with a questionable individual. The girl gave a sheepish smile and asked how she even got back home. The demon only agreed to spill the beans after she brought him a treat. Meowser munched on the jerky and said that Kalen flew in with her in his arms. He barely arrived before he started grilling everyone about what's been happening on the estate. After patrolling the grounds, the cat said everyone was asleep and hadn't seen them. Bella was surprised no one was looking for her and asked about her dress. She remembered waking up and finding herself wearing the demon's shirt. Bella was sure the maids would have freaked out about her missing dress. That would imply she left it somewhere else and, got busy with someone. She blushed, thinking about how nothing happened between her and Caden. Meowser said Caden brought the dress separately and hung it in the closet. Dude clearly had no clue why Bella was stripping down. The cat confessed that Caden already left a message saying nothing happened. Bella blushed when she found out he told her not to sweat it. It blew her mind how he actually turned out to be super considerate. Meowser shook his head, grumbling about how reckless they were being. He rubbed against the girl's hand when she thanked him and petted him. She added that if it wasn't for the cat, she could have been in deep trouble. Alice suddenly barged into the room and told her to come downstairs to the living room. A bunch of guys were waiting for her downstairs, ready to pop the question. One of them was shocked by the low-class competition he was up against. You could cut the tension with a knife between those 4 dudes. Alice squealed with delight, stoked that her lady was such a hot commodity. She rattled off the names of all the guys sitting downstairs right then and there. Isabella froze, lost in thought, like she was really processing what she'd heard. All those names matched the ones Jeffrey had told her about. It struck her as odd that Bella Cotera wasn't on the list. It all pointed to Katrina making a move, that's for sure. She decided to play a little game and said she'd bail on tonight's get-together. Alice was floored that she was even considering turning them down. The girl rubbed her head and playfully declared she was worn out from all the excitement last night. Alice blushed, thinking things were finally heating up with Caden. Bella smirked when the maid suggested rescheduling the meeting for another day. She insisted on saying she was exhausted from last night's activities. Alice was floored by how scandalous the message she wanted to send was. The maid figured she should get Lily's take on this whole thing. She lowered her gaze and asked what she should even tell the lords. Lily was stumped at first, but then an idea popped into her head. She said she'd go to them herself and give them the proper greeting. Alice perked up, assuming she was going to the drawing room. Lily smiled and asked them to wait a little longer so she could change. Meanwhile, the guys were losing patience fast. They'd been waiting over an hour, and no one even offered them a cup of joe. The young men shut their traps when they were told the Countess was on her way. They definitely weren't expecting a former princess to greet them. The guys jumped up instantly, staring at her like she was a ghost. Lily froze, noticing they didn't even bother to say hello. She knew there was a good reason her daughter had refused to meet with them. The men immediately started making excuses and apologizing for being rude. The woman smiled and asked what brought them there. After that chat, she suggested they have tea in the gazebo. She confessed she hadn't expected such distinguished guests. One of the guys there thought to himself, "She's totally calling us out." They all knew damn well they shouldn't have shown up at the Earl's place unannounced. He clearly didn't want to propose to Bella, but his folks were all over him. Lily smiled and said, "Why don't we get started on the food tasting?" She turned to Lord Rodriguez and asked him what he loved about her daughter. He was so caught off guard by the question, he nearly choked. The dude obviously couldn't admit his parents were twisting his arm. He stammered out something about falling for her at first sight. The woman seized the moment and asked if everyone else agreed with him. She forced a smile, pleased they thought her daughter was beautiful. The noble kids were still on edge, like their lives depended on it. Lily asked if they were all just lining up to marry her for looks. Her face darkened, saying beauty fades over time, you know. The woman realized they'd rushed over to propose because they were ordered to. She understood why Bella hadn't even bothered to come downstairs. Lily figured they'd perked up after seeing her with Lord Caden. She also noticed their manners, and looks didn't even come close to Caden's. Besides, he was the first guy her daughter had actually liked. Knowing that, she was ready to do whatever it took to help Isabella. Lily was pushing desserts on them, knowing they wouldn't be back for more. Meanwhile, Katrina just showed up in the second prince's chambers. He immediately guessed that her husband's health wasn't improving. The woman smiled and agreed, saying he was still in the same condition. He decided to cut to the chase and asked which girl her son would marry. Katrina was taken aback, since she hadn't even considered that. She didn't want her son caught up in all this power play. The prince laughed when she called her son too green for marriage. Astor gave her a knowing look, realizing she was dodging the question. The woman got nervous when she saw him get up. She barely got out a thank you for his concern before he clamped his hand over her mouth. He claimed his father was delaying naming an heir for the same reasons she was acting up. Katrina was shaking with fear, begging for forgiveness all over again. He loosened his grip and told her she needed to give her kid a chance. The prince touched her lips, waiting for her to give him the go-ahead. He ordered her to stop trembling and smile, saying he couldn't stand seeing her pathetic fear. Astor noticed the change in her demeanor and said he liked how agreeable she was being. He announced he was going to find a suitable match for her son, Jeffrey. Katrina knew it was game over when he suggested his own niece. She definitely didn't want that, knowing one massive secret. She tried to say they were like siblings, but the prince backed her into a corner. He thought it was awesome that they could actually become a family. The prince was totally messing with her, hitting her right where it hurt. He asked if she was against the marriage because of Count Collins. He ignored what she said and asked if she decided to become the next Marchioness. The prince turned and asked if she was planning on upping the dosage. She screamed, realizing he knew all her dirty secrets. He walked up to Katrina and asked what exactly she was so surprised about. The prince told her to think about why he chose her instead of Damien. Katrina realized she had no choice but to send the marriage proposal. Astor smirked, pleased, and called her a good girl. He left, telling her to seriously think about her actions. Something twisted in her chest when he implied her son might find out everything. She couldn't let Jeffrey learn about her extracurricular activities. Katrina returned home feeling totally messed up. Jeffrey was floored when she brought up the idea of him marrying Bella. He couldn't believe she'd say something like that with a straight face. Katrina snapped, calling him a spoiled brat who was disrespecting his mother. Her son begged her to drop the whole thing, adding that he wasn't her puppet. He froze when she asked if he had a reason not to get married. He asked her if she seriously didn't know why he couldn't marry Bella. Catherine caught his defiant stare and sharply called him Jeffrey Richmond. She felt a pang of fear when he questioned whether he really was a Richmond. The woman bit her lip furiously, trying to cook up an excuse. She moved closer to him, begging him not to listen to those gossiping busybodies. Jeffrey said he didn't give a damn what others thought. He wanted her answer. He'd known since he was a kid that people whispered about where he really came from. He never paid it any mind, because he'd always been his mother's son. His whole world got flipped upside down when he walked in on something. That day, he was at the Collins place and overheard his mother having it out with the Earl. He saw the tears in his mother's eyes, and what he heard just floored him. That night, he couldn't help but wonder if he really was a Richmond. The mere thought of Damien being his father made him sick to his stomach. He'd always brushed off the rumors, but in that moment, everything clicked. He was flooded with memories of all the gossip swirling around high society. People whispered that Earl Collins was the Marchioness's secret lover. He'd always been grateful to Isabella for never treating him differently. Jeffrey felt indebted to her and couldn't become a burden. Catherine looked at him and asked who he was. If not a Richmond. She went on to say that's just how marriages happen among nobles. The woman squeezed his hand, telling him that an invitation didn't mean he had to go through with the wedding. She looked at him, her eyes pleading, and said it was the prince's order. Jeffrey stormed off, muttering that she and the prince had both lost their minds. A few days later, he showed up at the Collins estate anyway. He arrived with a ridiculous bouquet of roses he'd grabbed on the way. The bouquet looked so out of place in his hands, it was like he was holding a broom. The guy confessed that his pushy mom had made him do it. Isabella slammed her book shut, annoyed, and asked if this was supposed to be a proposal. Jeffrey rolled his eyes and begged her to reject him as soon as possible. Bella smirked and demanded he do it properly. Jeffrey plopped down on the couch, thinking they'd all lost their minds. He asked her if she was even remotely worried about this whole mess. Bella just smiled and said she found the whole thing hilarious. He told her to hurry up and reminded her she hadn't come back to the ball that night. Bella confirmed it, adding that they decided to take a stroll together. He yelled, asking if she'd actually fallen for that moron. Isabella just smirked and said it was the best option out of all of them. She kept taunting him, saying that there's nothing more important than a guy's looks. Jeffrey grabbed his head and said she really had gone crazy. He also mentioned that someone else was behind this decision. Bella looked down, saying she already knew about Prince Astor. He admitted he was aware of his true parentage and that his mother was stepping out. Jeffrey said he honestly didn't give a damn who his biological father was. He loved the man who raised him because that guy genuinely cared and looked after him. The guy felt a pang of guilt, but Bella told him it wasn't his fault. She smiled and told him not to blame himself for something he couldn't control. Jeffrey couldn't believe that, even now, she was holding her head high. He looked down, saying his father had been really sick lately. It wasn't that bad at first, but now the medicine isn't doing anything. Bella understood his worry and offered to take a look at his father. He was beyond grateful when she promised to find a way out of this. Bella said goodbye to her friend, already picturing all the good that would come from the Marquise getting better. She smirked, deciding it was time to wake up the Marquis' worst nightmare. Meanwhile, Caden steeled himself to have a serious talk with his old man. His father calmly asked if he was really serious about getting married. Caden still couldn't read his father's mind, but he confirmed he was. The old man froze when he heard his son wanted to propose to Bella Collins. That name instantly brought back memories of the former Princess Lily. He coolly replied that he would send over a formal proposal. Caden couldn't believe his father was just okay with it. What really threw him was that his dad hadn't asked him a single question this whole time. He knew the old man wouldn't answer anyway, even if he asked what was up. Caden bowed and went to leave, but his father stopped him. He turned a box over in his hands, looking thoughtful, and offered it to him. He said it would come in handy when he was ready to pop the question. Caden opened the box, curious to see what was inside. Inside, he found a large family ring. The demon turned it over in his hands and noticed it had a monostone in it. It's a family heirloom, passed down to each lady of the Blake household. Those words unintentionally sent Caden's mind wandering way back. He wondered if his long-lost mother had ever worn this ring. He wasn't about to get all sentimental, so he decided to visit Bella. Damien met him at the door, asking if the trip had worn him out. Caden thanked him for having him and forced a polite smile. Damien figured out Caden hadn't seen Bella and came straight here. He decided he should ask her father's permission first. The demon locked eyes with the man and said he wanted to ask for her hand in marriage. The Blake family already sent a formal request, but he wanted to ask in person. Damien smirked, thinking he had this in the bag now. Ever since that meeting, he felt like he was walking on eggshells. Word on the street is the Richmonds sent Bella a proposal. Seemed like Katrina was getting all hot and bothered by Prince Astor. Damien smirked, said he could hardly believe it when he saw his letter. Caden confessed he felt like he'd lose her if he didn't act now. Bella's dad hinted it was a rash decision, like he was trying to play hardball. Caden played along, said he fell for Bella the second he saw her. Damien never imagined his good-for-nothing daughter would actually be useful. He was even happy Bella caught his eye, even though he thought she wasn't good enough. Caden was amused by the pompous way Damien talked about Bella. He also asked if he liked the monostone brooch. Damien smirked, saying he'd been sleeping like a baby ever since he got this thing. He rubbed his hands together, saying he was ready to make a business proposition. Caden played along, saying he was worried about his lack of knowledge regarding matters in the capital. Bella's father flushed with happiness, saying he could definitely help with that. Caden smirked, not believing how easily Damien had taken the bait. He said he didn't think it was right to discuss business matters today. Caden added that he didn't want his feelings to be misunderstood. After that, he decided it was time to pay Isabella a visit herself. The girl gasped in surprise when he snatched the book right out of her hands. She gathered her thoughts and fixed him with a piercing stare. The demon smirked and told her to put the book down and give him some attention. The sunlight was pouring into the garden, making the whole scene even more stunning. She immediately asked when he'd arrived and how the talk with her dad went. She felt his eyes on her and instantly blushed. It got even harder when he asked how she'd slept that night. She looked away and said she slept great, thanks to him. He studied her intently and asked why she was avoiding his gaze. Caden loved teasing her about crashing in his room. She said all she remembered was falling asleep in his bed. She started doubting herself again when they talked about how nothing happened. Caden immediately started running his mouth about how he got her undressed and then she got wasted. Every word he said just made her burn with embarrassment. Bella locked eyes with him and asked if he did anything while she was out cold. Caden smirked and asked if she really wanted to know. She stepped forward, calling him out for being such a tease. Caden could see she was getting pissed, but he was still enjoying talking about it. He told her to hold up and gently squeezed her pale shoulder. She froze, waiting for another jab, and then he booped her nose. The demon moved closer and said he was just admiring her. He clarified that he was admiring her face, since she always avoids looking at him. She tried to argue, but he caught her on that again. Bella said she couldn't look him in the eye and suggested they drop it. Out of nowhere, Caden dropped to one knee, saying he had something for her. He held out a box and asked if she'd accept this ring. Bella held her breath. She never expected it to happen so fast. Caden kissed her hand like he was dying to get an answer. He gently stroked her fingertips, looking playfully into her eyes. The demon slipped the ring on her finger and told her about its ancient history. Isabella glanced at her hand, flustered, like she could barely believe it. She never thought his family would give her such a gift. She thought she was just playing the part of a wife according to the contract. She asked him if she could really accept something so valuable. Caden stroked her fingers and said he needed to make it clear that she was his. He smiled and said he just wanted her to have it. He pulled her closer and asked her to take care of him, like a wife should. Bella stared at him silently, not understanding how he managed to say exactly what she wanted to hear. She still thought he could read her mind and was using it against her. She intertwined their fingers and asked him to do the same for her in return. As soon as she got back to the house, all the maids excitedly rushed downstairs. They squealed with delight when they saw the magnificent Mana Stone. Lily smiled and suggested sending a letter of agreement. She hugged her daughter tightly, saying she approved of Caden. Tears welled up in her eyes, overjoyed for her grown-up girl. Bella hugged her mom back, saying that even after getting married, she'd still be there for her. Lily smiled and said the future mistress of the North was still just a kid. Bella smiled back and mentioned an invitation had arrived from the Richmonds. Lily turned to a servant and asked them to bring the letter. It was an invitation from Katrina to a tea party at the Richmonds' mansion. This was a major event, one that could affect everyone's future in high society. Her mother never went out socially before, so this was the first time the Collins household had ever received an invite. Bella didn't have to go, but she promised she'd check up on the Marcus. She freaked her mom out, saying she shouldn't even bother going. The girl sighed, looking bummed, and suggested taking a look at the letter. The letter specified that Catherine only invited Bella, not Lily. That ticked Bella off, because she saw it as a slap in the face to Lily. The woman squeezed her hand, trying to cool her down a little. She smiled and said there was a way better way to get back at them than just getting mad. Isabella looked at her mother, intrigued, like she had no idea what she meant. Lily asked mysteriously if she would follow her plan this time. Isabella loved that her mom was slowly getting her groove back. A couple days had passed, which meant it was tea party time. The tables were groaning under the weight of all the amazing fancy food. Trays were all prim and proper with sweet pastries. The ladies were cackling like crazy, showering Katrina with tons of sweet talk. Katrina smiled and thanked them for gracing the place with their presence. The smile vanished the second she spotted the empty chair. She glanced at the vacant spot and figured Bella wasn't showing up. Katrina lamented how much she'd been looking forward to introducing her to everyone. The ladies immediately started gossiping about Isabella's bad attitude. Katrina was secretly thrilled at how predictably everything played out. She felt powerful, because the ladies of high society were judged by her standards. She wanted to prove, at any cost, that Isabella didn't belong here. Her plans went up in smoke when the girl apologized for being late. She proudly announced her name to everyone, showing off her lavish outfit. Katrina silently ripped her apart for her blatant audacity. She said it was fine and offered her a seat at the table. She stopped mid-sentence when Bella introduced her mother as her companion. Katrina couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her old rival. The other ladies were equally shocked that she'd shown up after all these years. Katrina frowned and hinted that she hadn't expected Lily's arrival. Lily plastered on a smile and said she wasn't on the invite list. Katrina bit her lip, not wanting the other ladies to know about this. She stepped forward, and Lily remembered they were supposed to be best friends. The woman doubted that she could possibly have been left off the list. She turned to Katrina, expecting her public agreement. The hostess turned around and saw everyone was staring at them. Trying to keep the anger out of her voice, she suggested the invitation must have gotten lost. She leaned in close to Lily and whispered a warning that she could be asking for trouble. Lily thanked her for her concern and pointed out that everyone was watching her. She asked if she really needed to teach her the basics of etiquette. Lily suggested I act like her when I throw parties. Katrina snapped back, saying it was her damn party. Lily patted her on the shoulder, telling her not to raise her voice. Katrina was seething when she heard everyone praising Lily. Suddenly, she decided she could just pick on someone else. Her eyes immediately landed on Isabella, sitting at the table. She noticed how fast Bella was scarfing down cake and asked if she liked it. Bella was deliberately keeping quiet to avoid attention, but they still noticed her. Katrina laughed and said she'd look like a big pile of frosting at her wedding. Bella put down her spoon and asked how Jeffrey was doing after that little incident. She brought up how messed up he was when she turned down his proposal. Looks like Katrina was trying to hide the fact her son popped the question. All the ladies were mentally roasting her for being a liar. Bella asked me to tell him she's sorry, 'cause she thinks he's a good friend. Katrin tried to act like she had nothing to do with it. She froze when Lily got upset and said she could have been a real Collins family member. The woman spun around, all tense, and asked what she was talking about. Lily implied that doing it any other way would be completely out of line. She was the first one brave enough to spill this scandalous gossip. There'd been rumors going around for ages about a love triangle between the three of them. Looks like even Bella was floored that her mom just straight up announced it like that. Katrina felt a real jolt of fear when she realized Lily knew. The ex-princess decided to stir the pot and stood up. She announced she wanted to share some happy news with everyone. The woman smiled and spilled the beans about Bella's upcoming wedding to Lord Blake. Katrina felt like she'd been punched in the gut when she heard that last name. Bella awkwardly brushed her hair back, saying she was embarrassed now. The ladies immediately spotted the famous ring with the monostone on her finger. Katrina knew Prince Astor was gonna blow a gasket when he found out about this. Lily surprised her even more when she started name-dropping those other guys. The moment she dropped those names, some of the ladies got real nervous. Meanwhile, Bella figured she'd use the chaos to track down the Marcus. As soon as she spotted Jeffrey, she was already apologizing in her head. He barely got over the tall tales she spun at the reception. The guy told her to pipe down as they got closer to the room. Jeffrey turned to his father and asked if he remembered Isabella. He touched his forehead and said she'd make one heck of a healer. Jeffrey talked to him like he wasn't even in a coma. The girl was surprised by his condition and asked if he brought her bag. The next thing she knew, she was holding a case packed with all kinds of tools. Isabella calmly pulled out her tools and started the examination. She came to the same conclusion again. He was definitely in a coma. The girl took off her stethoscope and asked when he'd last taken his medicine. Jeffrey remembered it had been a little over 2 hours since the dose. Isabella felt that familiar warmth at her fingertips again. She glanced at his fingernails and noticed those telltale half-moons. What she saw instantly made her think of the devil's fungus. She figured they'd been testing the fungus on Marquis Richmond for years. The girl glanced worriedly at the man, wondering how to help him. She didn't know how to break this to Jeffrey and decided to get a doctor's opinion first. Jeffrey mentioned he only sends the medicine through his assistant. That made her think he might be in on it. Bella slipped on gloves to hide any prints and asked to see the medicine. They snuck into the kitchen, where the bottle was kept. Their hopes for an empty kitchen dashed. She glanced at the dreamy chef and said they needed to examine the medicine. She figured someone might have tampered with the Marcus's prescription. Jeffrey's jaw dropped, but she told him to shut it. She ordered him to distract the cook so she could grab the medicine. He had no choice but to play along with her little scheme. The chef was caught off guard when he heard Jeffrey's hyped-up voice. He greeted him with a smile, asking what brought him to the kitchen. Jeffrey casually slung an arm around him and steered him aside for a chat. The second he winked at Bella, she knew this was her opening. She darted across the kitchen while the chef was looking the other way. The chef tried to get back to work, but Jeffrey kept hamming it up. He was pulling out all the stops to get attention, yelling like a little kid. Isabella finally spotted the vial of medicine in the drawer. She froze when the chef asked if all this was because of Lady Isabella. Looks like Jeffrey still had no clue what he'd overheard. The cook gave the kid a big hug, told him he could always come to him with anything. Bella hid the bottle and noticed some weird tension between them. She decided to slip away, hoping Jeffrey could handle things. The girl freaked out when she saw her dress snagged on the corner of the counter. Jeffrey saw she was frozen and yelled at her to get moving. Isabella decided to wing it and just bolted. Everyone in the room went silent when they heard a suspicious ripping sound. In the end, they actually managed to get out of that sticky situation. As soon as the adrenaline wore off, he started cracking up. Bella said she'd be able to tease him about this for the next 10 years. She remembered how hard Jeffrey begged her to acknowledge his suffering. Isabella couldn't help but laugh, remembering the snot flying out of his nose. Jeffrey smiled, realizing it had been a while since he'd heard her laugh. Catherine found them and asked where Bella had been hiding. She said they had waited for her, but then decided to take a walk on their own. Isabella apologized and said she got lost in their mansion. Catherine bit her lip, annoyed, and asked what Jeffrey was doing with her. The guy immediately replied that he just ran into her and decided to escort her. The ladies responded happily to his words, thinking of him as a true hero. Catherine was furious that he was acting like such a pushover. Jeffrey bowed out, saying his job was done here. Katrina stopped him, asking if Isabella had told the truth. Her son froze in place and asked what exactly she meant. She brought up Bella's words about him being heartbroken. Katrina was certain that what she said couldn't be true. Jeffrey asked, annoyed, why she was bringing this up in front of everyone. Lily quickly jumped to his defense, saying it was his personal business. He used Katrina's hesitation to make a quick exit. After that, he left them so fast they couldn't even get a word in. Isabella burst into tears dramatically, saying it was all her fault. She was straight up playing those ladies' heartstrings, turning on the waterworks. Lily patted her head and told her everything was going to be all right. She hugged her daughter tight, acting like she was totally lost. The other high society women started thinking the Marchioness was laying it on a little thick. Isabella hid her grin, thinking Jeffrey could learn a thing or two from her. That whole dramatic show sealed the deal on Catherine's downfall. And just like that, they took over the party, the Queen Bee's big bash. The next day, Isabella decided to drop in on her mentor. He was surprised at how cheerful she was when she showed up today. She smiled and said she'd live in the lab if she could. The guy asked her why she was dropping out of the academy. She swirled the stuff in the flask and said she had something more important than studying. The girl managed to whip up an antidote to the fungus, using a recipe from the tragic princess. The healer was surprised and said they should test it on some lab rats. He was totally blown away when she just took a bite of the fungus. He yelled, not understanding why she'd put herself in such danger like that. The girl just shrugged it off, saying one little mushroom wouldn't hurt her. She glanced at her hand and saw the effects of the fungus were already kicking in. The healer told her to let him know if she started feeling off. The girl agreed to his terms and decided to take a swig of the antidote. She chugged the whole flask of that concoction down in one go. After a bit, she reached out a hand, checking for results. Just like she hoped, she saw her skin changing color. The healer was floored that his medicine actually worked. He suggested she stay the night so they could watch for side effects. Isabella agreed, because she wanted to test something else out too. He handed her a reagent that only reacts to the Satan's cap mushroom. If it touched the mushroom, it was supposed to turn bright red. The healer was also curious if she'd managed to find any more of the mushrooms. The girl said it was the medicine that Marquis Richmond had been taking. She didn't even flinch at his surprised face and just got right to the experiment. The red color showed her there was a demonic fungus in the medicine. She was positive the Emperor's personal physician was involved in this. Bella figured Viscount Harrington was the one who cooked up the medicine. She was convinced that Prince Astor was pulling his strings. The physician panicked, desperate to get the info to His Majesty ASAP. Bella warned that they might destroy the evidence if they rushed in. She saw his confused look and just told him to trust her on this one. A couple days later, Bella started the next phase of her plan. She headed to the Imperial Palace with Caden. The Emperor greeted them back, mentioning how much the kid had grown. The demon gave a modest smile, saying he was flattered by the compliment. He declared that the Emperor was as refined as ever. Bella wasn't used to seeing Caden being so polite and respectful. The moment she thought about the difference in his behavior, he gave her a warm smile. Just one look from him sent shivers down her spine. She immediately regained her composure and heard the Emperor's heartfelt words. He asked if she'd be bringing a great-grandchild with her next time. The Emperor said that looking at them, he saw a bright future for the Empire. He asked if they had run into any snags while getting ready for the wedding. The guy was surprised when she confessed she wanted to ask him for a favor. She said she wanted to serve the guests a really special wine. Bella mentioned wanting to get it from the Jenkins family winery. That's how she hinted she wanted to talk to him again. She looked her grandpa straight in the eye and asked him to recommend a wine. The Emperor instantly knew she was asking for another meeting. Her impressive skills couldn't help but remind him of Lily. He agreed to her request and offered a few for her to sample. As soon as they were alone, they started talking about their conversation. Caden grinned and asked how she felt now that their relationship was out in the open. There was no turning back now, but she was still worried about her mom. Caden suggested they think about moving her mom up north. Bella knew that even the prince wouldn't dare touch her then. At the same time, she didn't want the Blake family to be inconvenienced. Caden said it would be better for her peace of mind, so she wouldn't be so stressed. Isabella blushed and thanked him for being so considerate. They kept cooing, hashing out the details of their future life together. Isabella froze, completely stunned, when she heard a man's voice. She saw Astor's smug look and wondered how long he'd been standing there. He asked if she'd been pretending to be unattached this whole time. Isabella greeted him calmly and listened to his congratulations. Astor made it a point to say he was worried about her mom. He straight up implied that Lily might be in danger. Caden gave the prince a long, hard look as he held out his hand. Astor huffed, noticing Caden wasn't returning the gesture. The demon immediately apologized, saying he was just a little flustered. He added that living up north, he wasn't used to the social scene yet. The prince suggested they get to know each other better over tea, but the guy turned him down. He said his schedule was jam-packed right up until the wedding. Isabella couldn't believe how cool he was playing it with the prince. She saw the anger flash in the prince's eyes and tried to smooth things over. The girl asked him to cut Caden some slack for his rough communication style. The prince hoped to catch up with him when he was in a better mood. Her touch was so nice, he didn't give a damn about the prince anymore. Sometime later, Isabella secretly arrived at the Jenkins estate. On the way to the cellar, they made small talk about the wine. The servant led the way, knowing they'd soon be talking about something else entirely. Caden confidently put his arm around the girl as they entered the Emperor's room. The man turned his head and greeted them with a warm smile. They bowed politely, after which the Emperor invited them to sit at the table. Caden turned him down, said he was more interested in checking out the wine collection. Isabella was surprised he basically gave them an opening to talk alone. The Emperor pointed out she kept her first promise like a champ. He offered her some tea, said it helps him stay in tip-top shape. She took a sip, and then he said he was ready to reward her. The emperor asked her point blank what she wanted. Isabella stood up and said she brought him a gift too. She apologized for being rude, then smashed the teacup with one swift move. Bella daintily wiped her hand and asked him to look at her palm. She asked if he felt a slight warmth on his fingertips. The girl laid it all out for him. The symptoms of using that devil's fungus. She pointed out that those symptoms matched up perfectly with the Marquis of Richmond. Bella stated, without a shred of doubt, that Viscount Harrington was slipping poison into his medicine. She couldn't let on that she'd learned about the fungus from the story of her life. Isabella said they were down to one last play, and then took a swig. She set the flask on the table and offered him her antidote. The girl added that he didn't have to drink it if he didn't trust her. She suggested he lay off the tea for a while, just to be safe. Isabella confessed that she was helping him because of her mother. They both knew that Prince Astor would crush any opposition the second he took the throne. That's exactly why the emperor had to stay alive. To protect her. The emperor smiled at her guts and said he'd pass on the tea. Isabella also handed him a book and asked him to read what was inside. It was Lily's diary from when she was just a kid. She wrote a lot in it about how much she missed her dad and home. The emperor actually found countless lines about himself. All those words, carried through the years, brought tears to his eyes. Isabella asked, as her reward, to be able to talk to Lily at her wedding. She was hinting that he just needed to see his daughter. That's why she wished he would come to her wedding as a gift. The girl gave a sweet smile and asked him to promise he'd come. The emperor's heart skipped a beat when she called him Grandpa for the first time. After a short silence, he smiled and promised he would be there. Back home, even Mauser complimented Bella on a job well done. He said it was a huge relief that she'd managed to cook up an antidote. Imagine her shock when she found out the love of her life had vanished. She turned around and saw Lily holding that book in her hands. To Isabella's surprise, there wasn't any anger or shock on her mother's face. The girl breathed a sigh of relief when Lily said she hadn't read it. She smiled and said she already knew what it was about anyway. Isabella froze, totally stunned, not believing what she'd just heard. Lily walked up to her and said she knew everything, even without reading it. The girl recoiled in shock when she heard her mother had also traveled back in time. With her last breath, Lily made a final, desperate wish. She begged for her daughter to be saved, then closed her eyes and heard a voice. Suddenly, the woman felt like she was in some other, unknown dimension. The demoness who appeared before her promised to grant her wish. That day, she'd given Lily a book that laid out her entire destiny. It detailed everything that had happened to her and Isabella up to that point. It also revealed how her husband, her friend, and her brother had plotted against them. The demon chick said she'd grant her wish, but she wanted something in return. Lily agreed right away and felt tears streaming down her face. She was ready to do anything to get revenge on the guys who did this and save Bella. After hashing out all the details, Hella grinned and told her to do her best. When she went back in time, the first thing she noticed was something weird. The maids were all gossiping about Bella refusing to go to the academy. She was shocked to find out her daughter was making different choices than before. From that moment on, she started digging into every single decision her daughter made. That's how she managed to come to one conclusion, and it turned out to be right on the money. Lily admitted she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to spill the beans about all this. It felt good for her to finally get that off her chest. You can imagine her surprise when she saw Bella crying. She hugged her daughter tight and kept saying it wasn't her fault. After that, they started talking about their plans for the near future. Bella had already told her she should head north after the wedding. Summer was coming up, so she could say she was going to get some R&R. She pulled out the imperial box and promised to make her the next ruler. Lily started to worry that the emperor might not accept her. Isabella told her to trust her and promised she'd put the crown on her head. Lily closed her eyes and agreed to whatever her daughter wanted. She lowered her head and said she'd gladly wear the crown he gave her. Meanwhile, Katrina and Damien were at each other's throats again, behind everyone's back. The woman kept pressing him, trying to find out why he did what he did. Damien's face twisted in anger, and he snapped that he should be asking that question. He demanded to know how Jeffrey dared propose to his daughter. Katrina backed away, saying the prince forced her to do it. Damien glared daggers at her, telling her to start thinking for herself. He asked if she even knew why he'd gotten involved with her, even though she was second-rate compared to Lily. He explained he only did it to make the prince the heir. The man left, saying that now Bella was his only hope. He told her to sneak out the back so nobody would see her. She clenched her fists, furious, and vowed he'd pay for it. A few days later, they ran into each other again at some fancy event. Katrina decided to put on a play for all the high society types. She greeted everyone with a proud smile, wishing them a pleasant evening. She specifically invited Isabella, Caden, and even her own son. Isabella immediately figured she was up to something. She stared ahead, lost in thought, until Jeffrey touched her arm. He asked, all worried, if her medicine would actually work. He still couldn't believe his dad would wake up, even if he took it every day. Isabella smirked and asked if he trusted her or not. Caden wrapped his arms around her from behind, telling her she was running her mouth too much. He shot Jeffrey a look and asked if all he could do was be suspicious. Jeffrey immediately protested, saying that wasn't what he meant. Katrina pulled everyone's attention back and said this play was something special. She beckoned Lord Bellick over and said it was his autobiography. Isabella glanced at him and recognized him as that scumbag. Katrina announced that they'd decided to turn his tragic story into a play. She said she hoped the star of the play would enjoy the story. Bellick was hamming it up, having a dramatic confrontation with a girl who looked like Bella. It looked like they were a thing, and then she dumped him for someone else. Looks like Katrina wasn't even trying to hide who the main character was here. Seems like she decided to go with a Bella-esque look. She thought this public shaming tactic was pretty clever. Now she understood why Katrina had been so quiet lately. She turned around and heard the aristocrats already starting to whisper. She was curious how Caden himself would react to all this. All he asked was if he could break that idiot's neck. Bella knew that if they got involved now, they'd just become part of this whole nasty mess. All that was left to do was strike at the source of this vile problem. The second she cooked up this twisted scheme, she went straight to Kaiden. She put on a sweet smile and begged him not to wipe Bellick's memory. She said if he just let Bellick go after all this, things would magically sort themselves out. Just like clockwork, Bellick stormed off into the hallway after the play ended. He smirked and said that woman was about to hit rock bottom. The guy was still fuming that she had the nerve to disrespect him like that. He was convinced Lord Caden would ditch her, and her own people would turn their backs on her. Bellick chuckled and said he might even take her in himself, just because she's got a pretty face. He was muttering to himself, totally oblivious that he was being followed. Caden smiled and said he warned him this was coming. Bellick screamed, totally freaked out, asking how he got here. Caden didn't say a word, just unleashed a blast of demonic energy. It sent Bellick flying, his body bursting into flames. Caden grabbed his throat, asking how he dared drag his fiancée through the mud. He promised to make damn sure he understood that, once and for all. Bellick screamed as Caden told him he wasn't getting away from the demon's clutches. Meanwhile, Bella was stuck having a little chat with her dad. He demanded an explanation for everything they'd just witnessed. Damien was worried people would start gossiping about her behavior. She asked if Caden was really going to call off the engagement because of some rumors. Damien threw his arms wide, making it clear that even now, he wasn't with her. Before he could even get angrier, Caden's hand appeared on her waist. He pulled her close and said he was dying to see her again. Damien shut his mouth when Isabella asked him to repeat what he'd said. The next second, Bellick, totally enraged, burst into the room. He threw himself at Katrina's feet, saying that Caden tried to off him. He started rambling about how his body was floating in the air. Caden, sounding bummed, called his words total BS and said he didn't do a thing. Everyone went silent when he brought up Bellick's failed proposal attempts. He walked up to the guy and said this was way out of line. One of the nobles actually backed Caden up and called out Bellick Otera. Everyone started saying he staged this whole thing because he's lost his marbles. Bellick stumbled over his words, trying to prove he wasn't crazy. Caden boomed out that he'd better not make things worse for himself. Then he bailed, leaving them to deal with Katrina. Caden demanded an explanation for what was going on. Katrina started claiming she had no idea who was supposed to be the lead. Lily put her arm around her friend and said there's no way she'd do something like that. She looked at Katrina and said her dear friend wouldn't stoop that low. Katrina looked down, feeling guilty, and said she wasn't told all the details. Lily demanded an apology for almost dragging Bella into a whole mess of trouble. The woman gave Isabella an awkward look and said she was sorry. Caden mentioned he was thinking about putting together a performance too, just like she did today. Bella said hers would be about some clueless woman who basically ruined her own life. She was shaken up after almost getting accused of trying to take something that wasn't hers. So that little revenge plot went down in flames, huh? After that day, Caden and Isabella just kept prepping like normal. Each of them was busy handling their own stuff. Time flew by, and before they knew it, the big day was here. It was the wedding day, and Isabella finally got to try on the dress. Guests were gathering excitedly in the main hall, where the celebration was set to go down. The maids kept gushing about how Isabella was the most beautiful bride ever. They were surprised she wasn't freaking out, unlike them. One of the maids playfully bit her finger, bringing up the wedding night. Isabella instantly blushed, like she'd totally spaced on that part. Even though it was a contract marriage, she still figured they'd have to, seal the deal. The maids grinned when they saw her face turn red. She turned around when she heard her parents' voices from behind the door. The door swung open, and she saw her mom and dad standing together. Lily walked up to her daughter and said she looked absolutely stunning. Damien smirked and asked if she was getting cold feet about the wedding. He told her not to screw things up before she became the lady of the Blake house. He said he was so proud of her and asked if he could give her a hug. She felt a wave of disgust as his hands touched her. Even now, he was reminding her not to forget she belonged to the Collins family. Finally, after hours of getting ready, the ceremony began. Bella walked forward, silently promising her father she wouldn't forget who she was. She glanced at the groom's smile and vowed to keep it locked away. She promised to remember it until the day she dragged him straight to hell. After that, the girl went through with the ceremony, binding their hearts and bodies. Isabella realized that Caden was just as freaked out about all this as she was. He was trying to keep it cool, but she could see he was rattled. Their faces went red when the priest said they should seal their vows with a kiss. Isabella awkwardly looked down, bracing herself for the big moment. Her heart hammered even harder when he touched her chin. She was seriously surprised when she realized he wasn't going for her lips. Everyone jumped to their feet, celebrating that they were officially husband and wife. That night, Isabella dolled herself up and slipped into something a little more daring. She hadn't even expected to be dressed up this much before her wedding night. As soon as she walked into the room, she spotted 2 glasses of wine. Caden greeted her like they were old pals, wearing nothing but a robe. Isabella, kinda lost in thought, asked why he hadn't turned on the lights. She blushed and covered herself when he guessed she might feel a little shy. The girl stammered, all flustered, saying she'd never worn something like this before. Before she could even finish, she was already in her husband's arms. He scooped her up like she weighed nothing and suggested they head to bed. Isabella was stunned by how eagerly he plopped her down on the mattress. She squeezed her eyes shut tight, feeling like her heart wasn't quite ready for this. Bella braced herself for a kiss, but all she felt was a cherry in her mouth. Caden grinned, remembering she hadn't eaten a single thing all day. To her surprise, he just suggested they chill out, grab a bite, and relax. He said he'd have a glass of wine, since he wasn't planning on sleeping anyway. Isabella glanced at the table, totally surprised to see all the desserts laid out. I guess she wasn't expecting her wedding night to go down quite like this. Caden knew the girl just wasn't ready for, well, anything. In the end, he didn't even get in bed with her, he just crashed on the couch. She decided not to sweat it, since this was just a business arrangement anyway. Isabella got up and tried to wake the guy so he wouldn't catch a cold. He groggily opened his eyes and heard her suggest he move to the bed. She offered to leave him alone, but he asked her to stay put. Isabella wanted to take a little walk, but he flat out refused. He gently but firmly gripped her wrist and begged her not to leave. Bella didn't understand why he was acting so weird. She tried to say she was okay, but he pulled her close. He saw where her head was at and confessed he just didn't want to pressure her. The demon blushed and said he wanted to do it when she was ready. Bella was touched by how considerate he was being. She stroked his face and asked how long it had been since he couldn't read her mind. Caden grinned and admitted he'd been caught. She said she wouldn't have to worry about him reading her mind and seeing something she didn't like. I don't think Bella realized how her words might come across. He laid her down on the couch in one smooth move, staring right into her eyes. Caden asked if she'd mind if he did what he wanted to do. She blushed and avoided the question when he asked what she wanted. That was more than enough for him to make his move. Without another word, Caden scooped her up and carried her to the bedroom. The demon pressed in close, like he wanted to kiss every inch of her. Her body was on fire from his touch. She pulled away from his lips, like she wanted to call things off. But Caden wasn't about to stop now. He confessed he wanted their first kiss to happen when they were alone. The demon slipped the strap of her negligee off her shoulder and suggested taking things slow. He smirked and said they had plenty of time before the maids arrived. After that, they spent the rest of the morning wrapped in each other's arms. Later that day, they gathered at the table with Caden's father. The man casually asked if they had slept well the night before. Bella smiled slyly and thanked him for his concern. She also mentioned to the man that her mother would be arriving soon. She felt super awkward because Caden couldn't take his eyes off her. Caden's father glanced at her and guessed that she didn't like the food. Isabella apologized and said it wasn't true. The man sighed wearily and figured Caden was to blame. He implied he was going to burn a hole through her with his glare any second now. He decided to leave the table, claiming he had a killer headache. Isabella glanced at the man and noticed he'd barely touched his food. He said he wanted to lie down and ordered her not to follow. The man angrily yelled that he'd make him regret it if he even thought about following him. After that, he slammed the door right in the servant's face. Ichoan apologized for her having to witness that scene. Caden demanded that Isabella be kept in the loop about everything, no exceptions. He also noticed his dad hadn't been doing so hot lately. Bella asked to take a look at his doctor's medical records. The girl smiled and said she studied medicine back in the city. Ichoan bowed politely and promised to find the records ASAP. Caden told him to just not give him the same attitude he gets. Isabella stroked his hand and said she had to get back to work. Caden smirked and asked if he should get to work too, then. He kissed Bella gently and said he needed to build a stronger connection with the lady of the house. Seems like he'd been waiting so long for their special night. He just couldn't get enough now. Even so, Isabella kept a close eye on the Duke. He seemed relatively stable, all things considered. It seemed like he felt his worst in the mornings. Unlike the morning, he'd be way calmer and gentler in the evening. Isabella started racking her brain, trying to figure out why he was like that in the mornings. Eventually, she went straight to his office, like she was looking for answers. She lurked by the door, trying to figure out what he was doing at this hour. Turns out, he was communicating with someone using a magic orb. Her eyes widened when she realized he was talking to his wife. Bella froze, stunned, like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. The next morning, he was back to being in a seriously foul mood. His eyes sharpened as he heard a knock on his office door. Isabella smiled, greeted him, and then stepped inside. The man scanned her thoughtfully and asked what brought her here. Isabella clenched her fingers and decided to get straight to the point. She asked if he and his wife were the ones who sent her and her mom back in time. She admitted she'd accidentally overheard their conversation last night. Isabella revealed that she knew he'd been in contact with the Demon Queen using a communication crystal. They were talking about how right they were about their choice of daughter-in-law. That's how she figured out that she, Duke Blake, and her mom had traveled back. She smiled and guessed that they'd all come back with him. Duke Blake frowned, exhausted, surprised he'd been outmaneuvered so easily. He admitted she really was the best choice for Caden. The guy added he had his reasons and asked her to keep it under wraps. Imagine his surprise when she agreed, but with a catch. She asked him to get more sleep, saying she figured out he was just cranky from being sleep-deprived. She reminded him how he'd been skipping meals because he had no appetite. Just a short nap at lunchtime, and he'd feel a whole lot better. Bella said that messing with his sleep schedule like that could really mess him up. He explained that they're dealing with a huge time difference, and he's swamped with work during the day. Bella offered to lighten his load and promised to take some of the work off his plate. She also mentioned that Caden should step up and handle his responsibilities too. That made sense to him, so he went along with her idea. He tapped the chair thoughtfully and thanked her for looking out for him. Isabella was happy that she was able to get along with this guy. Looks like Caden wasn't expecting all this stuff to land on them so fast. He was stunned by the mountain of paperwork she had to get through by morning. He was planning on keeping her up all night, but the documents beat him to it. Bella blushed and said she had to win the Duke over. She couldn't let him slip through her fingers and kept plowing through the documents. Caden didn't think she needed to go out of her way to impress him. He started going through the estate papers, one by one. He turned his head and saw Bella was already out cold. He chuckled, seeing she was so exhausted she'd just crashed. Caden glanced at the pile of documents, wondering what to do with them. He decided to plow through them before sunrise and tucked Bella into bed. She instantly jumped out of bed when she realized she'd slept in so late. Isabella asked Caden why he hadn't woken her up this morning. He smiled and said she was sleeping so soundly, he couldn't bring himself to. Isabella started panicking, freaking out about the promise she'd made. Caden proudly showed her a stack of papers summarizing all those documents. He said he did the job expecting to get paid. The demon smirked and promised to hand over the document after she wowed him. Without a second thought, Bella grabbed the back of his head and kissed him. She whispered in his ear and thanked him for getting the job done. The girl snatched the stack of documents and added they'd meet for lunch. Caden dreamily stroked his face and said he couldn't win against her. After that, they got together again to have lunch. Isabella noticed that his face looked way better today than it did yesterday. The Duke turned and said he'd read her summary. He said he was really impressed by the proposed drought duetsu. He thought using soldiers for this gig was a bright idea. Isabella smiled and said it was Caden's suggestion. Back at the magic tower, he was already studying how to absorb monster energy. Caden didn't say anything, just modestly looked away. The Duke was blown away when he found out that's how Caden spent his time. He used to think his son was a troublemaker, but the kid's got serious potential. The newlyweds were surprised when he called Isabella dear. He announced he had a certain matter where her help would be invaluable. Isabella gratefully took the tea, bracing herself for his request. She was sure he was about to drop a major bombshell. She was floored when he straight up asked if women hate guys who come on too strong. He and his wife were torn apart by duty, because they had to protect two different worlds. Lately, she'd been swamped and blowing him off every time he tried to talk. He was losing it, just completely heartsick over missing his wife. The guy was even pissed at the demons for keeping her so damn busy. Isabella wasn't seeing some swordmaster anymore, just a husband who was head over heels. Duke Blake decided to cut to the chase and asked how he could smooth things over. The girl said there's nothing better than just laying your feelings out there. He figured he should buy her some bling, but she suggested writing a letter. The Duke wasn't convinced that would be enough to win her over. Bella asked if he knew her favorite words and suggested he put them in a letter. Duke Blake perked right up and said he definitely would. He sincerely thanked Bella, like she was his own dear sister-in-law. Isabella was relieved he was way nicer than she'd expected. From then on, the Duke was always dropping by, always with some excuse. He'd ask her advice about everything, like envelope colors, flowers, the whole shebang. Eventually, he started looking for her every single day. On one of those days, Bella heard he was waiting for her again. Before she could even say a word, he burst back into her room. He happily showed her the letter Hella had sent in reply. She said she appreciated his feelings and promised to visit him soon. Isabella read the letter and was surprised that she would arrive at the palace soon. He was so stoked, he didn't even know what to do with himself. The Duke sincerely thanked her and asked if there was anything she wanted. He was so happy, he was ready to give her the Mana Stone mine. Bella needed a new angle to get her father's attention. She confessed she had some plans and asked to borrow the mine. The guy said he'd transfer the ownership rights to her and asked her to take care of it. Isabella tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't budge. He tried to ask her to the bookstore, but Caden butted into their conversation. The jealous devil immediately grilled him about what he was doing there. The Duke didn't see anything weird about hanging out with his daughter-in-law. Caden reminded him that she was his wife first, and then his sister-in-law. He stepped closer to Isabella and asked her to make time for him today. The Duke tugged her by the shoulders, saying she'd already agreed to a walk with him. Isabella gave an awkward smile and said his father was right. After that, they left, leaving Caden alone in the hallway. The situation was so out of left field, it left him completely speechless. Feeling totally sidelined, he decided to peace out to show how ticked off he was. A whole week went by since he secretly vanished from the palace. She went to Lord Meowser and asked him to find out where he was. The cat said he couldn't get a hold of him either. Isabella felt panic rising and talked it over with his dad. The Duke called him a damn fool for already making his wife worry. He saw Isabella's sad face and figured she was really stressing out. He told her not to sweat it and said he'd have Ihovan look into it. That night, she found out again that he hadn't come home. She couldn't figure out why she was so freaked out about it. Isabella tried to remember when she started taking this relationship so seriously. All their memories together flashed through her mind like a whirlwind. She'd seen some things in her life, but this guy was different. Remembering all those moments, she realized he was the first one to really get to her. She called him a jerk out loud for just disappearing like that. The next morning, she woke up to a familiar voice. A gentle hand was stroking her face, trying to wake her up. She opened her eyes and was surprised to see her mom's face. At first, she didn't even understand why her mom was there. She jumped out of bed and asked how she'd gotten there. She was even more surprised when Lily said Caden had brought her. Lily smiled and asked if he hadn't told her about it. Bella told her about the recent events that made her think he was disappointed. Lily smiled and said he didn't strike her as that kind of guy. She mentioned how he wouldn't shut up about Isabella on the drive home. And on top of that, he was worried she's been swamped with work lately. Bella froze when her mother stated that her husband was head over heels for her. She wanted to reply, but they heard a sharp knock at the door. Caden opened the door and saw that his wife was already awake. He gave her a guilty look and stated the obvious. She was already up. Lily smiled and mysteriously said she was going to go get some rest. It was like she knew they needed to talk alone right now. He froze when Bella pointed out he'd gone to the Collins estate. She wanted to know why he hadn't given her a heads up before leaving. He tried to lie, saying he didn't do it on purpose. Knowing she was busy, Caden, blushing, admitted he did it just to get her attention. Bella looked at her husband with sympathy, even though he'd been a pain. She apologized, saying she just wanted to earn his father's approval. She gently squeezed his hand, telling him she'd been worried sick. He turned red with joy, realizing she actually cared about him. Isabella asked him to promise he'd always be straight with her from now on. She blushed when he asked if she'd missed him while he was gone. Bella replied, flustered, that she didn't mean anything by it. He immediately called her out, implying she had ulterior motives. Caden moved in close to her lips, saying he was always down for that kind of thing. He tossed his jacket aside and suggested they spend some time together like a real couple, just for once. The demon seductively unbuttoned his shirt and asked what she thought. Isabella couldn't resist after all those lonely days. Meanwhile, her father was finally getting a chance to chat with Duke Blake. He thanked him for the warm welcome he'd extended to him and his wife. Damien also mentioned how delicious the food was at their palace. The Blakes had nothing but rare delicacies on the table, stuff even nobles have trouble getting their hands on. Damien thought to himself that he finally felt like he was being recognized. He also decided to bring up the generous gift he'd given Bella. The guy was talking about that Manastone mine, the one with all the expensive gems. Duke Blake said he was even thinking about handing over the rest of the mines to her. Damien was stoked, because he thought it would take way longer to get this far. He glanced at his daughter and was secretly pleased at how quickly things were moving. Turns out, Bella was even more useful than he'd anticipated. As soon as breakfast was wrapping up, he pulled Isabella aside. He suggested they have a little heart-to-heart, like father and daughter. Isabella smiled and asked him to give her just a couple of minutes. Damien agreed to her request and headed to the hall where the meeting was supposed to take place. He was fuming because he'd been kept waiting for 2 freaking hours. Bella finally deigned to show up, greeting him with a smile. She apologized, blaming it on a mountain of work. The girl took a haughty sip of tea and decided to get down to business. She asked him to state the topic of conversation, saying she was super busy. The man swallowed his annoyance and decided to get to the point. He asked if she needed a reliable guy to move some mana stones. He reminded her of her idea and said he'd dropped a fortune buying mana stones. The girl said she was planning to target influential nobles. He bit his lip and asked if the Collins family wasn't good enough to get the distribution rights. Bella remembered that the Collins family wasn't exactly top-tier society. Damien yelled that he'd trusted her and shut down his other deals because of it. But the second he saw her icy glare, he said he was just speaking out of turn. He begged her to reconsider, mentioning their prime location. The guy pleaded with her to help him out, promising he wouldn't let her down. Isabella decided to play along and offered to draw up a contract. Her father smiled, all happy, totally clueless about what he was getting himself into. She handed him the document and asked for an upfront payment for the jewels. Damien's eyes went wide when he saw that insane amount. He crumpled the paper, a nervous wreck, thinking she'd screwed up the numbers. The girl insisted everything was correct, pointing to the cost of the Blake family's mines. On top of that, she promised him exclusive rights. The price was still insane, but those exclusive rights were like a siren song, man. In the end, he caved and agreed to sign the contract. Isabella flashed a winning smile and thanked him for his business. That night, the moon looked totally epic. Lord Meowser woke Bella up, demanding she follow him ASAP. Isabella was clueless who she was supposed to meet at this ungodly hour. She felt her breath catch in her throat when she saw that woman. Isabella couldn't immediately place where she'd seen this woman before. Standing in front of her was the very demoness from the underworld she'd made a deal with. She waved hello and asked how her favorite was doing. Meowser bowed his head before Her Majesty, the Demon Queen. It finally clicked for Isabella. She was face to face with Caden's mother. Hella held out the baby to her, asking if she could hold it so her arms could rest. This baby was Caden's little sister, named Lahel. Isabella didn't even know he had a little sister. The girl glanced at the queen and realized Caden took after her a lot. She instantly remembered asking to borrow her son for her little scheme. Then, she had the nerve to say he'd be useful for carrying out her plan. She found it shocking that Hella said to use him however she wanted. She blushed at the thought that she now had to change the way she talked to her. She glanced awkwardly at the Demon Queen and called her mom. Isabella decided to find out why she wanted Caden to take her place. She also told her about how Caden felt abandoned. Her words brought back years of heavy sorrow for Hella. Bella added that no reason would change the fact that she hurt Caden. Hella suggested they go somewhere private to discuss this. They locked themselves in one of the bedrooms, where Hella could finally tell her story. She looked away, deciding she had to explain everything from the start. Isabella already knew about the marriage alliance between Legend and the demon world. Even though they called it a marriage alliance, she was basically a hostage. Her older brother was a warmonger and had no intention of stopping. He planned to get rid of her with this marriage deal and sent her to Ethan Blake. Isabella asked if she had gone to the Duke willingly. Feelings weren't part of the plan at first, and she never expected things to turn out this way. Against all odds, real feelings actually developed between them. On top of that, he even volunteered to help her overthrow her brother. Even though they had to put their plans on hold because of Caden, they were meticulously prepared. Thanks to that, everything they planned went off without a hitch. Hela took her brother's head and became the new queen of the demon realm. When the demon world descended into chaos, a rebellion kicked off. She had to cut off contact with her family to keep them safe from her enemies. Because of that, the crown's power got a boost, and they got Lahel. Still, the real problem started with Caden. She never expected her half-breed son to have that much power. Eventually, things got so bad his mana overloaded and, well, that's why she burned all her own mana to turn back time. She sent Bella to the magic tower to pull him out of there. Hela confessed she was a perfect match, and he was all over her. Isabella couldn't wrap her head around it, since they'd never even met. Hela explained that it took a massive amount of juice on her part. Because of that, she's got a time limit now, which is a real pain. Meanwhile, Caden was tearing up the whole palace, trying to find Isabella. He happened to overhear that the new demon ruler had to be crowned before things went south. Caden was the only one with the power to keep everyone in line. So, he was forced to head into the demon world kicking and screaming. Looks like Hela noticed how bummed out Isabella was getting. She guiltily looked away, knowing it wasn't fair. Caden burst into the room out of nowhere, asking what the hell was going on. You could see the shock plastered all over his face. He stared blankly at Hela and just asked, was she his mom? Caden yelled so loud it woke up Lachelle with a start. The girl rubbed her eyes, all tired, and asked who the dude was. Isabella ran to Caden, looking freaked, and said she could explain everything. Her face twisted up in despair when he pointed out she knew all along. He glared right through her and said she'd been playing him this whole time. Caden asked how much she enjoyed watching him jump through hoops for her. Isabella practically begged him to listen, but he wasn't having any of it. Her heart stopped when he coldly accused her of just using him. Now he was convinced there was nothing between them but a calculated game. All this time, he'd been dreaming of a happy future with her, working his butt off for it. He thought he'd finally found the one he could call his own. Caden concluded that he never mattered to his own mother, or Bella either. He turned to Hela and said he definitely didn't expect her to stab him in the back like that. She tried to say she was sorry, but he didn't want to hear it. The guy glared at her, saying he didn't give a damn about the demon world. He told her not to drag him into this mess, and to sort it out herself. Caden walked away, saying he wasn't planning revenge or playing happy families. The second he slammed that door, Bella felt a sharp pain in her chest. After that whole mess, Caden bounced from Blake territory and went back to his tower. He honestly lost track of how many days he'd been drowning his sorrows in booze. All he did was drink himself stupid, then pass out cold. He figured he should get some fresh air, try to clear his head. Caden looked up at the moon and remembered the first time he saw Isabella here. That day, he thought an angel had come down from heaven to visit hell. Now he realized that her cruelty was a perfect match for her beauty. He sighed sadly, deciding it was all over and nothing mattered anymore. Caden spun around when he heard a weird rustling sound behind him. He suddenly noticed a crying kid sitting against the wall. Caden glanced at him, and it hit him hard. It was like looking at himself as a boy. The kid looked up at him with these scared, lonely eyes. Caden was thrown for a loop when the little guy said he missed Isabella. Meanwhile, Isabella was just going through the motions, living her life without her beloved husband. The maids kept trying to whisper behind her back about how cold she was. They were all shocked that Isabella seemed so indifferent to her husband's disappearance. Those nasty maids clearly had no clue what she was really going through inside. Only Ethan noticed how much she'd retreated into herself this past week. He mentioned that Hella and Lahel had finally gone outside for the first time today. They were holed up in that room of theirs for ages, like they were locked down. So, they're back to thinking Caden's chilling in the magic tower. Isabella wanted to know if he was pissed at the Duchess for ditching him. Ethan said he was majorly ticked off that she put a spell on him and then bounced. Even so, he still trusts her, because of the contract they made. That contract binds them for life, as partners, and you only get one shot at it. Demons are good for their word, especially when a contract's involved. Ethan said Caden's a demon too, so he can't weasel out of fulfilling his end of the bargain. Hearing him say that gave her a tiny sliver of hope. She was still turning over that whole lifelong contract thing in her head. She was wondering if she could stay with Caden, if he'd have her. Their current contract was for a year, but she didn't want him to leave. She spun around the second she heard his voice, asking if she missed him. Isabella found her estranged husband standing right in front of her. She went straight to him, saying she couldn't get a hold of him. The girl looked down, guilty, and apologized for the deception. She wanted to explain why everything happened, but he didn't want to hear it. He took a step closer and told her she didn't need to explain a thing. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed her shoulders and pushed her onto the bed. Caden smirked and suggested they skip the unnecessary chatter. He leaned in close, suggesting they get up to something a little more engaging. Isabella thoughtfully stroked his face, leaving his question hanging in the air. The demon thought he could manipulate her feelings, but he was dead wrong. She gripped the back of his head hard and told him he was no Caden. His eyes flashed red as she realized he was an incubus. The unknown creature chuckled at how quickly she'd figured him out. He grinned like a maniac and suggested she play with fire. The incubus offered to help her, cope with her husband's absence, but she wasn't buying it. She kicked him where it hurts and shoved him away. Bella told him to get lost, saying trash like him could never measure up to Caden. The demon dropped the act, baring his fangs with a nasty grin. He called her every name in the book and promised to wipe her off the face of the earth. The incubus squeezed her throat with everything he had, like he really wanted to end her. Before he could finish the job, he felt a searing pain shoot through him. Caden burst into the room and went straight for him with his sword. It was like he could feel Bella calling to him, like she was right on the edge. The guy pulled her close and asked if she was hurt anywhere. He stroked her face and called himself a fool for leaving someone so important. Caden felt terrible and apologized for putting her in danger. Isabella started to say sorry too, but they were interrupted when the incubus went flying through the window. Caden kissed her and said he could tear him apart, but he didn't want her to see it. Isabella confessed she was worried he wasn't coming back. Caden said that was never gonna happen, because he'd been waiting years to meet her. He decided to tell her what he learned from his younger self. That night, he was battling a fever, while the Blakes were hosting some big shots from the city. He was fighting the pain racking his body when this sweet little girl came to see him. She took care of him that day, even though she didn't even know who he was. She stroked the sick boy's head and told him not to worry. Bella cheered him up with her gentle smile and promised to help. That day turned out to be the happiest of his life. The next morning, he tried to find her, but everyone was already gone. From then on, he kept badgering his dad because he wanted to marry her. Thanks to him, Bella finally understood what those words meant. She apologized for forgetting about it after all this time. Caden gently kissed her forehead, happy that she was back with him. He gazed tenderly into her eyes and promised he'd never let her go again. After a short pause, Isabella asked if they were dreaming. Caden asked, worried, how she figured that out. Isabella already knew that incubi could only appear in dreams. She smiled sadly and realized he couldn't wake her up. Caden agreed, saying he was able to reach her because of his mana. Isabella figured she must have been fighting it in her sleep with everything she had. Caden told her not to worry and promised he'd find a way to wake her up. He asked her to hang in there, and then she gently kissed him on the lips. The girl stroked his face and said she'd wait for him. She saw the dream fading and told him not to be long. Isabella said goodbye, calling him her beloved husband. Caden woke up, remembering that she'd confessed her love at the last second. He turned thoughtfully, like he couldn't quite believe everything that had happened. The demon barely managed to get up, and then Meowser said he'd taken down the incubus. The cat wondered out loud why Bella wasn't waking up. Caden blew him off, just pulled her closer, and told her he loved her right back. Meanwhile, the incubus reported back to his seriously bummed-out boss. He dropped to his knees, shaking, saying he was beyond redemption. Hella was right to suspect those parasites were cooking up a revolt. It was a bright, sunny day, but Isabella still wasn't waking up. Lily knocked on the door like always, bringing in some food. She walked in and found that demon sitting by the bed. The woman explained he hadn't touched a thing in days. Caden, feeling like crap, apologized for not being able to protect her daughter. Lily didn't blame him, said it was just an accident. Caden was thrown when she said she had no reason to hold a grudge. She confessed she was in on it, agreed to send Bella to the tower. Lily closed her eyes and decided to tell him everything that went down. In their past lives, they died a horrible death because of her husband and the prince. She also mentioned that Caden had been trying to suppress his powers. After that, the Demon Queen turned back time to save him. Lily agreed to a deal that their kids would get married. The key condition was that the marriage would last until he became king. Lily figured Hela found out about his wanting to marry Bella. He was floored when she said a mother would always give her life to save her child. Lily suggested he ask his own mother those questions. Hela walked into the room, looking guilty, and glanced at her son. Lily left the room so they could talk in private. She looked at her son again, trying to find the right words. Caden said he already knew everything she'd done to protect him. He broke down and just asked her to apologize and say she was sorry. The woman squeezed his hands and begged for forgiveness, saying she was so sorry. Over and over, she sincerely repeated that she was wrong. Hela gently stroked his cheek, something she hadn't been able to do for years. She hugged her beloved son tightly, like he was a dream about to vanish. Tears welled up in her eyes when he first tried to call her Mom. She stroked his hand and told him that she really was his mom. Caden broke down, pleading with her for help with all his heart. He told her that Bella couldn't wake up because of some kind of curse. Caden was ready to go anywhere, do anything, if she'd just save Bella. Hela had never seen her usually stoic son so completely shattered. Looks like Meowser saw the willingness in her eyes and started yelling. He knew she was already struggling to keep her own power going. The woman said they'd just have to put their plan into action sooner than expected. She added that Caden had to take her place and protect his wife. Hela knew she was taking a risk, but she didn't have a choice. Meows sighed wearily and agreed to prepare everything for the ritual. The woman also said that Caden would have to return to the demon world sooner than planned. After that, Meowser brought everything needed for the ritual. He tossed Caden a vial containing the essence of mana. This formula contained the concentrated mana of the Demon Queen. He also said that Hela was resting now, and there was no need to worry. Meows said to give this to Bella so it would act as an antidote. Caden immediately took a swig and poured the contents into Bella's mouth. He made damn sure that stuff went right into her mouth. Then her body just lit up, like she was transforming or something. Like magic, Bella opened her eyes and said he really did save her. Caden couldn't believe his eyes when he saw his girl was alive. He hugged her tight, thanking every god that she woke up. Meowser slipped out of the room, real smooth, to tell the queen everything. Caden sat by her bed and said he'd have to head back to the demon world soon. Bella suggested making their bond permanent, so he wouldn't worry. She smiled and said they'd be able to meet again, just like his parents did. Caden couldn't believe she was ready to spend her whole life with him. The demon gave a sweet smile and went along with her plan. He mentioned they'd be swamped with political stuff pretty soon. Bella snuggled up to him, asking him to take good care of her in the days ahead. Sometime later, she met up with her folks. Damien asked if she was doing okay after being sick. She said, sounding tired, that she had a ton of work piled up while she was out. Damien smirked, all business, and said he figured out how to get those mana stones circulating. He was thinking about gifting them to certain people as, like, an investment. Bella scoffed and called it a pretty dicey investment. Lily chimed in, saying she probably just didn't get how business works yet. Lily was saying her Damien never really got the chance to show off his business smarts. Bella saw she was playing along on purpose and asked her to spill the details. Damien figured he'd pitch it to General Felid, who knows a lot of people. On top of that, he was thinking about making mana-infused beauty stones for the ladies. Damien grinned, real proud. When she complimented his brilliant idea, he jumped up when he found out sealing new mana costs money too. Bella explained that only mages from the Blake house can seal hers. The guy asked why she hadn't mentioned this sooner. He bit his lip, looking annoyed, and asked how much it would set him back. Damien was even more shocked when he saw the insane price tag. Bella said, feeling guilty, that she'd done everything she could to lower the amount. The guy said he was left with absolutely nothing after all the business cutbacks. It made her sick to her stomach, watching him beg his own daughter like that. She smiled and suggested he borrow the money from someone else. The girl knew about the Imperial Bank's terms and suggested he get a loan elsewhere. Isabella smirked and suggested taking out a loan in another place. She mentioned that getting a loan from her mother-in-law would be easy. As soon as she saw the panic in his eyes, she said she'd find another investor. She added that the Blake family wouldn't be happy if he turned her down. Isabella feigned sadness and said she knew all about his talents. She was hoping he'd seize the opportunity and prove what he's capable of. The girl was playing his ego like a fiddle, dangling that future status in front of him. She was pulling the strings, promising him the crown prince's approval. Damien just stared at her, like a puppet looking at its master. Only then did he agree to do things her way. That night, even the bad weather felt like a looming threat. Damien watched the rain, wondering if making a deal with dark forces was the right call. All he could do was hope for the best. Meanwhile, back at the Blake estate, the atmosphere was a whole lot nicer. Caden looked at his sobbing sister and asked how she even came to exist. She didn't give a damn about promises of a new toy and straight up threatened him. Lechel was bawling so loud, Isabella heard her wailing from way over there. Turns out, Hella accidentally ripped her teddy bear, which is why she was losing it. Bella calmly asked to see the toy and promised she could fix it right up. She grabbed her sewing kit and said it would only take a couple of minutes. Bella kept her word and even sewed a brand new dress for the bear. Lechel immediately lit up with joy and was super grateful for the rescue. Bella smiled and said she was happy that she was happy. Lechel was blown away by Bella's beauty and asked her what her name was. She said again that Isabella was beautiful and asked her to be her plaything. The girl promised she'd treat her well. Looks like Isabella didn't get what she was saying. Didn't think much of it. Caden clapped a hand over his wife's mouth, told her not to answer the girl. He explained that if she answered the puppet master, she'd lose control of her own body. Bella caught the kid's crazy look, which gave away her abilities. She got up, looking annoyed, and asked him what he was doing. Caden smirked and replied that Isabella was already taken. Lechel confidently said she didn't care and promised to take her anyway. Without another word, Caden drew his sword and told her to try it. Lechel turned to her bear and tugged on its strings. He immediately reached for his tools and grabbed a needle. Then, the bear lunged at Caden with lightning speed. They froze in their tracks when Hella ordered them to stop. She instantly scolded Lechel, telling her to remember what she'd said before. The woman intercepted the threads, saying she shouldn't be wasting mana like that. She also chewed out Caden for even thinking about attacking his sister. Then, Hella apologized to Bella for her daughter's behavior. She picked up the girl and said she'd calm her down in private. Lechel kept crying, shouting threats at Caden. Isabella thanked him for stopping her from becoming a puppet. Caden smirked, saying he didn't want his wife turning into some kind of puppet. They just happened to bump into a servant carrying a letter. He finally managed to track down Isabella and hand her the letter. Isabella thoughtfully turned the sealed envelope over in her hands. Turns out, it was yet another invitation to Katrina's tea party. She scanned it closely and noticed something fishy. It turned out the date was the same as her tea party back in the capital. That meant Katrina was deliberately throwing down the gauntlet. Luckily, her tea party was scheduled for the evening, unlike Bella's. Even so, it was obvious who would throw a better party. Katrina was gunning for them to be compared. Isabella was dead set on not backing down from her challenge. She smiled and said she was planning on shaking things up. After some time, the big day of the two tea parties finally arrived. Katrina made damn sure her whole entourage showed up at Isabella's tea party. The ladies were practically drooling, gossiping about how Bella didn't bother to change the date. They were sure she'd be totally humiliated next to the Marchioness of Richmond. Katrina said this was their chance to teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. She happened to spot a lady who looked like she was about to keel over. She smiled and asked Madame Osborne how she was feeling. The woman admitted she really wasn't feeling herself. Katrina ripped into her for showing up looking like that. She sarcastically called it a relief when she said she popped a pill. Katrina wanted Isabella to look like total garbage next to her. Unfortunately, her reservation for the hottest designer dress got canceled at the last second. No sooner did she think about the dress than Bella showed up right in front of them. She greeted them politely, saying she understood how they must feel. She thanked them for coming and showed off that very dress. Katrina couldn't believe they gave her dress to Isabella. She realized that was the dress she had reserved earlier. The Marchioness of Richmond gave her props for all the hard work she put in. Bella smiled and said she even bought this dress just for today. Katrina gripped her fan, not believing they'd rejected her for Bella. She scoffed, saying offering champagne was a bit much. The ladies were skeptical, because they thought they'd be having tea. They definitely weren't expecting Bella to bring out the top-shelf bubbly. She showed them the bottle's label, famous throughout the whole empire. She was holding some seriously high-end champagne, known for its price tag. Everyone was blown away that one bottle cost as much as a whole building. The girl told them to enjoy the drink to their heart's content. Isabella thanked Lily for the preparations and suggested a toast. The woman raised her glass and proposed a drink to everything that binds them together. She eyed the golden liquid in her glass and wished everyone good health. The other ladies were blown away by the exquisite taste. Katrina was floored by how Bella flaunted her wealth. Looks like even she didn't expect the champagne to be this good. Isabella watched her telling reaction closely. She smiled, pleased that she liked the taste. Bella noticed her glass was empty and offered a refill. She pointed out that no one had even touched the appetizers. The ladies figured these snacks were loaded with calories and bad for you. Bella told them not to worry and rang for service. Right after that, waiters came out carrying boxes. Bella announced she had prepared a special gift for everyone. Katrina gave the box a skeptical once-over. She wasn't expecting much, probably just some cheap trinket. Her reputation was about to get a major boost once she saw the gift's dazzling glow.